Police officers of Reddit, what was your oh shit moment? A law prof in Australia, spent 20 years as a cop before becoming a lawyer and eventually teaching. In explaining the battered wife syndrome defense to murder, he told a story of a call to a little old lady's house where she had said on the phone that she had killed her husband. Before this incident, he didn't really understand why it existed. Why doesn't the woman just leave? Why doesn't she just go to someone else's house? Prof shows up to the door and is greeted by a little old lady saying, "Come in, would you like some tea?" He goes in and she starts putting some cakes on a tray and pouring tea. He wonders if she saw their point. He asked, "So you said that you killed your husband on the phone. Would I be able to see him?" She directs him to the living room where the old man was on a lazy boy chair, bottle in hand, and a tomahawk in his skull. Meanwhile, old lady is asking if he takes sugar or milk in his tea. The prof said at this moment he realized why the defense of battered wife existed. The drunk old guy had been beating her for years, controlled all the money, and didn't let her have friends. She had nowhere to go, even if she left him. So on this day, after saying he was going to beat her if his sports team lost, she took matters into her own hands. He said this was the moment he realized that sometimes there are situations where life doesn't make sense and people take the only way they can see. This happened August of last year, was about 1:22 in the morning when a 911 hang-up call came in where all that was heard was screaming and swearing. I was the closest unit, riding alone as my partner had been voluntold for another assignment that set of days. So when I got out into the area, I was initially waiting for backup. However, as I was walking up to the house, I heard several voices screaming. Rushing up to the house, the first thing I noticed was blood everywhere. The floor, the walls, the door, all covered to shoulder height. A distraught woman screamed and pointed me towards the living room. Once I get into the living room, I see a male and female on a couch, both covered in blood. The male had a massive laceration on his right forearm, and the female had taken a belt and snake wrapped it around his arm to try and stop the bleeding. Seeing how the belt was applied, I knew it wasn't doing anything to stop the blood flow, so I pulled out my tourniquet, and as I prepped it said to the guy, "This is gonna hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bleeding." I applied the tourniquet just above the top of his bicep, and knew it was on properly when he told me his hand had started to go numb. It was at that point I noticed a second deep gash on his tricep that went down to the bone. It took him about 15 minutes to get to the house, and the paramedic made it abundantly clear that had I not applied the tourniquet, the male would have bled out long before they were able to get their point. In the end, turns out the guy had come home drunk and forgot his keys, climbed up to a second-story window, and punched his way into the house with near deadly results. Edit. Removed am as it was redundant. Edit. 2. Apparently tour is confusing. A suicidal girl was dropped off at the hospital. Myself and my colleague were there escorting another prisoner from custody. This girl came and spoke to our prisoner. They'd never before, but they were just making idle hospital waiting room chit chat. The girl vanishes, not bothered. We don't know why she's there, who she is. We just assumed she'd gone somewhere else. After a while our prisoner says that girl has been in the toilet a long time. Perhaps she's having a big poo. We laugh and then realize it had been a while. So I start banging the door. No answer. Door locked. I unscrew the lock and she sat there, wheezing and not super responsive. My colleague goes for help, and a nurse comes and unzips her jacket and she's made a ligature from a sock, and she's blue and not breathing. I managed to cut it off. It was on tight, we couldn't get scissors in to cut it, and she's taken through to get checked. Now breathing again. My partner goes with her. I'm stood by the door with my prisoner getting air. The whole thing is stressful. This happened in the middle of a busy AE. For you Yanks, people are just looking at me. Next thing I know, a healthcare assistant is running out to me because this girl is now becoming violent and my partner needs help. I can't leave my prisoner and I can't leave my partner to get beat up. I chose to go for my partner. This girl is smashing her head into a wall, kicking, hitting, and trying to bite. It took 3 of us to get her calm. I barely managed to get the assistant's shout out before going in. Radio signal is poor to non-existent. Luckily the prisoner sat patiently in the waiting room whilst we dealt with that. They weren't cuffed, they cold ran, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. On top of all the stress that day caused, I didn't really have the oh shit moment until I was in my car on the way home and I realized a girl nearly died 5 feet away from me. I wouldn't gave known if it wasn't for the prisoner paying attention to where their new friend went. Edit. Thanks for the silver. Dad is a newly retired cop, 30 years on the force. He has a couple gems that he has told me. Last one is pretty sad, so if you have any type of suicidal tendencies, consider this a trigger warning. While working as a patrolman, he had a couple encounters with people high on PCP. The first was a lady who cut her entire anus out and ripped the inside part out. She woke up the next day with no recollection of what happened. She will have to be on a colostomy bag for the rest of her life. Another PCP story. Guy was butt naked in the middle of the road sweating profusely. For those who don't know, PCP raises your body temp, so people get naked because they are hot. The guy used a broken glass bottle to cut his genitalia off, balls and everything. He ended up bleeding out before EMS arrived. Sad 1. Thanksgiving morning, Dad worked a night shift and was home by 6 a.m. I came to the kitchen to help cook for Thanksgiving and see him staring off into space, something bothering him. Turns out there was a bad car accident and the car caught fire. The woman inside was stuck because her seatbelt had melted to her. Dad went to pull her out and described how her skin had just crisped over, so when he pulled on her to free her, the skin just kind of peeled off. They eventually got her out, but she had suffered severe burns and was permanently disfigured. Dad is ended up getting burned up pretty good too on his arms. She ended up surviving, but took her life about 6 months later. That one my dad couldn't really ever shake. I think he blames himself for not getting her out sooner. That kind of heartache comes with the job, I suppose. Anyway, those are some memorable stories. He's got tons more, but those 3 come to mind right away. Witness to autopsies. Watching them pull the testicles out from the inside, or the needle in the eyeball to get samples of eyeball fluid, or the sight sounds and smells of the bone saw cutting through the skull, and the following suction sounds of the top of the skull being pulled off. Or check welfare call. Call to check on a 50-year-old lady who hadn't been seen for a few days. Got to the apartment, looked through a couple windows after no response at the door. Last window I checked, had to try and get my bearings while looking through half-open blinds. Realized she was there dead in bed, eyes open. I have seen plenty of dead bodies prior to this call, but that one gave me the heebie-jeebies. Or another dead body call. Died in his sleep. I had been in the bedroom for a couple of hours making notifications and requests for a mains removal. A belt slid off the treadmill and hit the treadmill belt pretty loudly. There was no reason for that belt to fall off that treadmill. Cops get PTSD. 2. Edit. Sheet. I have so many. Patting down a male arrestee for a female officer. Dude was passed out at a green light. He was already cuffed. Right as I got down to his right ankle, I heard it. It sounded like a garbage disposal choking on pudding. Dude shit himself right there. I didn't say anything as he sat down in the back seat. The female officer went to the opposite side of the back seat to assist in buckling him in and gagged. "Oh god, what's that smell?" she said. "Me, he just shit himself. Lol." I was in a community policing unit. Right as me and about 25 other community policing officers got out of a meeting, a report of a homicide came out just blocks from our station. Dispatch advised we were looking for a red truck. A fellow officer called out he had a red truck nearby. I was first there as he was pulling the driver out at gunpoint. As we approached him and got him cuffed, I turned and saw the biggest traffic jam of cop cars I had ever seen. Later that day, I watched a traffic cam recording of the traffic stop. I lost count at 53 cop cars coming to back us up. More of a holy shit than a no shit. Got a call for a emotionally disturbed person. Arrive on scene and a 350-pound man built like an NFL lineman is passed out on the floor face down. His wife says he suffers from PTSD from the first Iraq War and that he was an army ranger. He had been drinking heavily. His son is on scene and about 16 years old. The man begins to wake up and proceeds to smash his forehead into the ground repeatedly. We call for an ambulance. A small pool of blood begins to form on the floor. The wife grabs a rag and goes to wipe it up when this guy's head jerks up real quick. his face contorted in rage. He grabs the wife by the neck and throws her clear across the room onto the couch. We immediately jump on him, but he is preternaturally strong. There are 4 of us, and we are each fighting one limb. The kid jumps in and helps us get 2 sets of cuffs on him because one set was not wide enough to connect his wrists behind his back. I ride in the ambulance to the hospital with him while he glares at me angrily, reciting his military registration number and telling me I won't get any information out of him and that I'm a towelhead. I don't remotely look like I'm from the region. The entire ride I hope that he doesn't break out of the cuffs. If I'm being honest, I'm not sure we would gained control of him if the kid hadn't helped. Not a cop here. This is more a story of how I unintentionally gave a cop a no-seat moment. I had a night job managing a liquor store in a very bad neighborhood. It was a one-room affair with me behind a desk with a cash register just inside the store's entrance. I'd only had the job for about a month when a friend dropped by to shoot the sheet point. After a bit, he asked me if the store owners had provided me with any kind of protection given what a nasty neighborhood it was. I told him, just this old double-barreled shotgun that's kept under the counter here, but it's empty. With that I reached down and picked up the shotgun to show him. Unbeknownst to me, 2 armed robberies had just gone down on a fast food restaurant and another business close by within a couple of blocks, and the police were responding to the calls in full force. I heard the sirens, but didn't think much of it because sirens were pretty common in that part of town. A police car swerved into the parking lot in front of the store and the officer jumped out of his car and dashed in to check if the robbers weren't hitting my store. 2. The cop burst through the front door of the store seconds after I'd picked up the shotgun to show my friend. Him coming through the door as fast as he did startled me, and without thinking, I turned toward him with the shotgun in my hands, and it was inadvertently pointed at him. His gun was holstered and I had the drop on him. At that moment he didn't know if I was the perp who'd just robbed the other stores or what. His face went paper white. Both of our minds were blown at the exact same time. I quickly laid the gun down and let him know there was no harm intended. But I'm pretty sure he's never forgotten that particular row sheet moment, and neither have I. Just checked onto my shift. As I turned my patrol car on, my radio was in mid-broadcast about an accident just outside the city I work in. I voluntarily checked en route to help out the best I could. While heading there, I was informed that it was actually closer to the next city over, but that I would still be the first one there. I was then told it was a head-on collision. I arrived on scene about a minute later. It was in fact a head-on collision. 5 people from one vehicle were not wearing seatbelts. All 5 were fatally injured beyond any measure. There was nothing I could do. A doctor showed up on scene shortly after me. Nothing he could do. I watched 2 adults and 3 children die in front of my eyes. The 6-year-old little girl just stared at me unblinking as she passed. I still get emotional. They were students at our elementary school. I knew them because I routinely go to that school just to see the little kids and give them junior police stickers, take pictures with them, and let them play with my gadgets and police car. I went to the memorial service that the school put on for the girls to pay my respects. Their father was there and didn't know who I was, or that I was the first one there, or what I saw. He was talking to another father, clearly in between denial and anger phases, about how he wished he knew what officer it was on scene, so he could kill him for not doing anything, and why didn't he do anything, and blaming me for their deaths. That was really hard to hear. I wish I was a superhero and could have used magic powers to save those poor children. I'm sorry, little ones. You deserve to live your lives. Edit. Thank you all for the kind words and support. I have actually gone and seen a professional regarding it. That has helped a lot. Unfortunately, it is just something that will be with me forever. I'm doing pretty well overall and recently welcomed my first child into the world. Experiencing what I did makes me just love and appreciate every day I have with him even more. Thank you to everyone again, and also thank you for the silvers and wow, my first gold too. I wish it was for something much happier, but still, I really appreciate it. I think this counts. About 9 years ago we get a call from a payphone. There's a dead body in the abandoned building at corner 1st and Main. Street names made up for this story. An officer responds to the area and can't find anything that would be considered an abandoned building. The caller hung up without leaving any information, and the payphone that he called from was several miles from that area. So the officer clears out the call, having no contact point. The next day we get another phone call from another payphone. There's a dead body inside the abandoned building at the corner of 1st and Main. Again they hang up without offering any other information. This time I get dispatched the report. I head up to the area of that intersection and start looking around. Now understand that I live and work in a fairly sizable metropolitan area, and this was when the economy was still good, booming even. Abandoned buildings were hard to come by at that time. I drive through all the shopping plazas and little industrial complexes within the vicinity of that intersection, and I can't come up with anything. So I start driving a little bit further in each direction. But I remember that there's some new construction that hasn't been finished yet, and I wonder if they think that those are considered abandoned. I get out of my car and walk through a bunch of businesses that are still in the framing stages, but I can't find anything. As I leave the area, I'm now more than a mile from the original call location. As I pull out onto the major roadway, I stop for traffic and look in front of me. There it is. A gigantic electrical component factory that has been vacant for probably the last 15 years. It has a 9-foot wall around the entire perimeter, and the landscaping is still maintained, so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb right away. That added to the fact that I'm pretty far away from where the caller said it should be. But then again, it's abandoned. It's definitely abandoned and has been for a very long time. So I call for another unit to back me up, and we go check it out. We use a drainage pipe to climb up and over the 9-foot wall to get inside the perimeter. We start walking the building, checking every single door. When I say this place is big, I mean it's faking huge. It's over 100,000 feet. It's like an old abandoned Motorola or Freescale or Intel type building. It has gigantic coolers on the outside, pipes running all over which way, ductwork running down the sides of the buildings, loading docks, and a basement. Every door we come across is locked and secured. We continue walking around looking for anything out of place. As I get about 3/4 of the way around the building, I pull on a door and it flings open. I called my backup, who comes over to me. We knock, announce, and enter the building. As we step into a hallway that leads about 100 yards down with doors on either side, the door we just stepped into closes. And it's black. Pitch black. Like can't see my faking nose on my face black. We start moving through the building, trying to clear each room as the best of the two of us can. But this place is absolutely gigantic, and each room is connected to what seems like 4 other rooms. We stepped into one room and the door closes behind us. It must have been some old clean room or something. It was the weirdest thing, because there was no sound. Nothing. I couldn't hear the traffic outside, or the grumble of electricity or air moving. All the sounds that we heard throughout the rest of the building were gone in this one room. When I spoke to my partner, our voices didn't even echo. It must have had some kind of sound cancelling insulation or something. But it freaked me the fuck out. The floor had random 12-inch holes in it that led down to a basement that was flooded by over 6 feet of water. Wire, ceiling panels, and wire jacketing were hanging from the ceiling. There was broken glass, broken pieces of metal and brick, holes in the drywall, and abandoned equipment all over. I clearly remember thinking to myself that if there ever a time that I would be attacked by skinless zombie dogs, this would be it. And the entire time we are trying to find a dead body. As though this sheet wasn't freaky enough, I'm actively looking for a dead guy. We end up moving through the building, clearing it as best we can, until we get to what was definitely the industrial part of the building. Gigantic boilers, evaporative coolers, and components that run the building. Oh, and spiders. A shit ton of spiders. We stepped into a room and find that it is a dead end. We've reached the end of the building and we don't have any further to go. The room is about 20 x 30 feet and contains 5 very large electrical cabinets. They are about 8 feet tall and each about 4 feet wide, sitting next to each other. And they look exactly how I would design the lab of an evil genius if I had to make a sci-fi movie. The entire thing was covered in dials, levers, and red and green buttons. But only the panel in the middle was still illuminated. It had one steady glowing red light on it. The first and only light I saw in that entire building. My partner calls out to me, "You got anything?" I replied, "No, nothing in here. Looks like this was a gigantic waste of time. Just let me take a look behind these cabinets and we'll be good to head back to our cars." The panels have about 18 to 24 inches of room on each, and between them and the wall behind them. I walk over to the left side and peek my head around, and bam, there he is. A faking dead guy on the ground, pinned between the wall and the cabinet. He's on his back, arms in front of his chest like a T-Rex, and he has some injuries. And I nearly shot him. Not gonna lie. He scared the living shit out of me. Even though I spent the last hour actively looking for him, I still wasn't completely ready for it. So skip ahead to calling detectives etc. At the time, stripping copper was fairly new, at least to our area. I didn't recognize what the wirejacketing meant, as I hadn't seen it before. These two knuckleheads in breaking into this abandoned factory for God knows how long and systematically stripping every piece of metal out of it. And they made it all the way to the very last room. The only room that still have power running to it. C. The middle panel, you controlled the fire suppression system for the building. And the owner's insurance policy required that it remained on active. When these guys opened up the panels, they must have thought they hit the mother lode. Each one contained an 1.5-inch copper cable. Now an 1.5-inch copper cable is worth quite a bit of money, but it also conducts quite a bit of electricity. They cut through the first one successfully, leaving the sharp ends exposed inside the cabinet. But when this poor sap started cutting into the second one, he got the right of his lifetime. Not only did he electrocute himself, but the current coursing through his arms pulled him into the cabinet, stabbing one of the exposed ends of the previous cable into his chest. This kills the copper thief. R/Teles from Thesquidka. Okay, I've had a few oh shit moments. I'm referred to as a sheet magnet on my shift. I was working a late Super Bowl night for overtime one night. I remembered seeing a vehicle sitting in a car wash stall as I was on the way to a call. I drive back the other direction an hour later and see the same car still sitting there unwashed. There doesn't look like anyone is preparing to clean it either. It's an area of high drug activity. I pull into the parking lot and move to sneak up on the car to see what might be going on. I see a male in the back seat and he sees me. He immediately begins reach down near the seat, and I'm hoping he isn't grabbing for a weapon. I draw my gun and tell him to show me his hands as I'm moving to get a better line of sight. He finally brings his hands up empty. I tell him to get out of the vehicle for me. He says he needs to pull up his pants first. I'm sorry, what? He wasn't grabbing for a gun. He was trying to get the pocket bussy he was using off his dick and get his pants up while I'm pointing a gun at him. I holster up and tell him to do the same. He gets out and I can see a fairly large quantity of meth for a single person sitting in the seat next to his pocket bussy and an all vibrator that I hadn't noticed before. I ask him if there's anything else in the car. He says there's some heroin too and a couple dos. He then begins begging me to throw his sex toys away before his wife gets there to pick up the car. Apparently he had told her he was going to wash the car midway through the big game. He left her and their guests at his house so he could have his own special halftime show. Edit. Thanks so much for the gold. Had a call come out as a crash without injuries. Rolled up to the call with my partner, myself, and another unit. The guy had crashed into his own front yard, but there was no property damage. When I tried to get the guy to sign a crash statement, he told me he didn't want to and that he hadn't slept for 10 days. Then he told my partner that he had just gotten out of the hospital after an evaluation. It was cold outside, so we let him sit in the back of my buddy's cruiser while he filled out the statement of what happened. He kept making statements like, "Just kill me, man," and "Guys, just blow my head off right here." My partner called the hospital to make sure he didn't escape or something, and the guy wasn't going to receive a citation at all, since it was his own property that got damaged. Just a tow to his driveway, which was right there, and that's all. While walking back to the back of the cruiser to let him out, the guy pushed open the door when my partner opened it and yelled, "Let's go, motherfuckers," before attempting to tackle my partner. All three of us jumped on top of him and began trying to hold him down while he kept screaming. He then reached up and bit my partner on the arm. We got him in cuffs, then transported him to the hospital, where we had to fight with him 2 more times in the hospital, and he bit a nurse. Everyone was okay, and it ended up being that he was just mentally unstable, no drugs involved. I don't know if I'd call it an oh shit moment, but it stands out. Point call of a burglary in progress. It was late, about 4:30 to 5 am, and we got off at 6:30, so nobody really wanted to go to this. Anyways, I go with a handful of other guys. All we knew was someone was breaking the windows in from the backyard. As I pull up, 2 people come running up from inside saying someone has entered the home. We set up with a couple more guys, and my corporal looks through the wood fence to see what he sees. Blood everywhere and a man face up on the ground. We make entry, and he's dead. I never figured out who he was, but our best guess was he got high on meth and thought this was his pad and tried to break in when he couldn't open the door. Had a great gash in the bend of his arm where the glass from the window cut him. He didn't die quickly. There was blood all over the backyard, particularly where the door was that he was trying to get into. Luckily, we had an actual homicide earlier that night, so Cap detectives were already there and were able to come to the scene to handle it. One more recently was where 4 gangsters tried to rob the wrong guy, and he shot all 4 of them. 3 headshots. 1 dead gangster right on the sidewalk. It was raining too, so it looked just like the movies, where the blood was running down the street. I work in an aggressive city. Correctional officer here, not sure if that counts, but I'll tell a story that happened a couple of weeks ago. I was doing some paperwork in the block office of my unit when I got a phone call from the officer in the control center. He told me something was wrong and that I needed to go to one of the cells immediately. I asked him what the problem was, and he said he wasn't sure, but that I needed to go check it out. Usually when this kind of call comes in, I go to the cell, and one of the guys has a toothache or something silly, and I end up escorting them to the infirmary so the nurses can treat them. The officer seemed pretty worried, but I didn't think much of it at the time. As I get to the cell, I notice that the floor is completely covered in blood, like so much blood I can't actually see the floor. There's so much blood it looks like the set of one of those gory B horror movies. One of the offenders is slumped over, not responding. The other is sitting leaned up against the cell wall panting. They are both covered in blood. At this point I thought that I was looking at a homicide. I figured they got into an altercation. One pulled a shank on the other, and a struggle ensued. I immediately turned on my body cam and used my radio to call for first responders and nurses from our infirmary to respond. I'll save most of the details so this post doesn't go on forever, but long story short, what actually happened was that both of the guys had made a suicide pact. They both cut arteries in a place that I would rather not mention and swallowed a bunch of razor blades. On the table in their cell they left a suicide note and their sink was full of razor blades. Luckily we got to them when we did because they were close to bleeding out. I ended up getting blood all over me, after which the guy whose blood was now all over me mentioned that he had hepatitis C. I had multiple OC moments that day. Responded to a welfare check called in by a social services hotline. A male had called in and said he was suicidal. They provided a name for the male and the number he called in on. Our dispatch was able to find a previous call from that number and the address linked to it. My partner and I responded to that address and the father answered the door. We explained why we were there and asked to speak to his son. The father knocked on the son's locked door while we spoke in the hallway. I asked if he was getting dressed and we knocked again. Immediately after we heard the distinct sound of a handgun slide racking. We drew our handguns and told dad to go outside immediately. While attempting to get mom to go outside, she tried to walk down the hallway to son's door and I had to force her out of the residence. My partner and I both took cover inside the residence and gave commands to put the gun down, telling him we just came to check on him and to talk. 30 to 45 seconds into the whole ordeal, a single gunshot rang out from inside the bedroom. It was clear to us that he probably had shot himself 1 to 2 minutes past, and we had 2 additional officers on scene and were able to force entry into room and found the man immediately inside the doorway, single gunshot wound to the head. He was beyond helping. It was surreal telling the mom and dad their son was dead. It didn't faze the father at all. Point inside his room were other spent handgun shells and holes in the wall from where he had shot the walls previously. He also had steak knives stabbed into the drywall. It was clear their son was disturbed and needed help, and I have no idea why the family did not seek out advice on what to do. Back when I was young and dumb, I liked to do one-man surveillances. It was easy. The city I work for had a huge drug problem, and the dope spots were well known. One night I parked my police car around a corner and walked to the sidewalk, where I stood halfway hidden behind a bush watching people walk up to a drug house the next block down. I saw one guy walk up, go in the house for a hot second, then come back out and start walking towards me. Perfect, I thought. I'll stop him, see whether he just bought drugs, and work my way up from there. So I stepped back into the shadow of a doorway to wait. Little did I know that he saw me, or at least he saw the outline of a man backing into the shadows along his path. But he kept coming, and so as he walks up I stepped out and said the thing I seemed to say to every person I stopped back then. "What's up, man?" Thankfully I had my flashlight, and I was in a full uniform, but I see his face register a look of pure shock and I hear something clatter to the ground. So I grab him up and handcuff him real quick, and he's saying he didn't know I was an officer, and I looked to see what he threw. It was a knife. He thought I was going to try and rob him. When I saw that, we looked at each other, just stared into each other's eyes without speaking. Both of us probably thinking the same thing, how bad that could have gone. I told him to turn around, took the handcuffs off, and told him to grab his knife and kick rocks. And we just both chalked that one up to good fortune. I have a few. I've got about 5 years on in a medium-sized city. My first was while I was in field training. Call for a possible overdose. I went into the basement of the house while my trainer was grabbing his medical stuff. I got down there right as this dude high on bath salts started to come to. He went straight to tackling me and tried taking my gun. I was able to keep him from breaking my weapon retention and fight until my trainer got there and we got him cuffed up. My second was hearing a medical only call for a 6-month-old not breathing. I happened to be 2 blocks away. I got there and started CPR until EMS arrived. The kid ended up not making it, and to this day I think about it a lot. I hate running medical calls, but a lot of times we respond so much faster than fire and EMS. My third was a traffic stop on the interstate. Make contact with the driver, who is obviously drunk. I get him out of the car and tell him to face away from me so I can pat him down. As I'm going to start I ask him if he has anything on him. He starts to pull away and his hand shoots to his waistband. That's when I see the outline of the gun. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, but I was able to grab him and push him against my car and pull the gun from him. He ended up being like a .200 back and having Xanax in his system. I think if he had been sober he would have been quicker, and it could be a different story. Not a police officer, but was in an explorers program 20 years ago. The officer in charge of training us, forgot his name, was giving a lecture on what it was like to be hit with a taser. Being immature and stupid I called bullshit and tanned my mouth how a taser wouldn't bring me down. 16 at the time. Well, he goes off and says to get a waiver signed by my mom and demonstrates to the class how much I can withstand about 35,000 volts. You can guess where this is going. So my mom was a real bad alcoholic. I didn't bother asking for her signature. Instead I had a friend forge it. The mayor of our city lived 2 houses down and was a notary. Without saying anything she stamped and signed it. 2 weeks later I returned to the classes and gave him my slip. I was made an example out of. I thought he was just going to stick me with a taser for a second or two. No, he broke out a faking stun gun. I don't remember much, but my muscles contracting to the point they felt like they were going to burst. I fell to the floor and there was some of his EMS and fire department buddies standing by. Everything was blurry. Everyone was laughing. That was a harsh lesson on how stupid I was, running my mouth thinking I knew better. I never went back. I was really embarrassed. That was a no shit moment for me. Late to the party, but it's the realest story I got. Only a few months on the street with barely any real training. Thanks Chicago, on foot patrol, and here pop. partner and I look at each other and are kinda iffy on how far away, but we head south, get 1 block down, and approach 3 individuals. The 5 of us stop and just stare at each other when calls start coming out of shots fired with a description matching one of the 3 to a T. We are so close they can hear the radio and dude takes off running. My partner stayed with 2 and I ran after the 1. Down the block, around a corner, and then down a dark alley. He makes a turn behind a garage, and I draw my pistol, make the turn, and there he is 10 feet away pulling his gun from his waistband. 100% honesty here. I yelled drop the gun and I immediately started pulling the trigger. About 100 feet behind him, I see a family playing on their porch and release my trigger. Didn't shoot, adjust to the left, and as I'm about to pull again, thank God he drops the gun. Good story, right? Doesn't end there. I put him on the ground and now his hand is inches from the gun he just dropped. I have a gun in one hand and a flashlight in the other, and I really couldn't decide which one I should put away to cuff him, so I just sat on his back telling him not to reach for the gun while I called for help. Thankfully it all ended well, but what always got me was the guy was 15 years old and in lockup told me I was lucky. Apparently he made the turn and was pulling the gun to shoot me. His exact words were, "You're lucky. I was gonna shoot you, but you got the drop on me. Had I not drawn as I turned the corner, I would have legit been looking down the barrel of a gun held by a 15-year-old kid who had already made up his mind he was gonna shoot me." Had other close calls working in Chicago, but that was the first. Oh shit, should I really be doing this moment? Contacted a transient in the middle of the night. He had an illegal campfire. Not really a big deal. He apparently decided he didn't want to be contacted. Jumped up, spun around, had a knife in his hand. We started to wrestle around a little bit. I pulled my gun and tried to give him a contact shot to the head. Click. I then proceeded to use my Glock as an impact weapon. Spoiler alert, polymer pistols aren't super great impact weapons. But it was enough to make him not conscious for a long enough to get the cuffs on. I call fire and medics to check him out before I transport him for a medical clearance. The fire captain asks if I'm alright. Yay, I'm fine. He then notices part of my uniform is darker than the rest because I'm bleeding. Dude stabbed me. Oh, seat point coming back from the jail, I had my radar on. Car coming the opposite way, on a highway, just out of my city, pinged the Doppler at 90 something. I flipped around real quick and let it up. Start to walk up. Vehicle occupied by 4. I opted for a passenger side approach. As I walk up to the car, I notice the driver is holding a handgun down and to the right. Oh shit. I took a big step back and asked for a code 3 back for a subject with a gun point. It's referenced elsewhere in this thread, but it's pretty fucking cool and a little scary how quickly the blue wave can appear out of thin air when you need help. Taken into custody without incident. Point last one. Another officer makes a pedestrian stop on a kid. I say kid, he was like 16. Kid pulls a pistol and starts capping off rounds at the officer. Officer's car took some rounds. Officer returned fire. Guy fled on foot. Officer just put out shots fired. And nothing else. Oh shit. The sergeant jumped in and called a 999, and like the entire county showed up. Agencies you forget exist on a day-to-day basis like state park rangers, fish and game wardens just appeared out of the ether. Other agencies showing up with bearcats and SWAT teams and shit. Way more resources than I think we needed, but it was definitely cool that every surrounding agency dropped all their shit and sent the majority of the on-duty personnel. Man, I have like 10 of these right off the bat, but I'm getting changed to go home. I'll try and update this tomorrow. Edit. Still need to wind down, so here are a few. I had a guy who was trespassed from a liquor store after getting in a small scissor related fight with another patron. No one was hurt, and we ultimately opted to just give him a ride to the next town, which is what he wanted. So we get him in the car and drive him over the bridge. Along the way we are just making small talk, and he seems like he's been having a bad day and just wanted to get home to relax. We get to the area he wanted to go, and I let him out of the car. I wished him well, and he looks me dead in the face and tells me to go fuck myself. I'm like, well, that was weird, but okay. He turns back toward where we came from and sprints away to the bridge, where he hops the railing. God damn it. So I walk over to him and I'm talking with him for 45 minutes until a negotiator gets there to take over. Once relieved, I stayed pretty close as the way I saw it, we just drove this guy, literally, to kill himself. The whole time I was talking to him, and the negotiator was talking to him, he is taking pills from a bottle. Like an hour later we get him to agree to come back over. He is currently sitting on like 5 inches of concrete on the other side of the rail. Right as he goes to get up, he starts having a full seizure and begins to fall. I got lucky making a diving grab through the bars and was able to get him around the neck. So there I am, dangling with the full-size man over several hundred feet of air until a rope rig gets set up so we can get him over to safety point another time. We had a call for a lady with a butcher knife who went to her neighbor's house, threatened to kill her, then gave her a hug and left. We start checking the area to come up short, so we get out of the car and start looking around. Dispatch updates us that more calls are coming in from a gas station about a block and a half away that match the same behavior, minus the hugs. It is currently rush hour and no way we are making it by car, so I start sprinting. Once I get to the busy street I had to jump to the hood of a car that about hit me and start toward the gas station. I get about 50 feet away when it was like a Jurassic Park movie, a huge group of people screaming and running from the station. Then the lady comes around the corner wildly swinging the knife around and power walking at us. Well, fuck. I figure based on the behavior she is having some kind of schizophrenic episode and try a huge gamble to get her to snap to. I yelled as loud and sharp as possible, hey. I followed it up with a clear and more calm, put the knife down and get on the ground. Thank God we had training on this and it worked. We got her under control and luckily no one was hurt. Then this one time, I was driving alone. Normally I have a partner, but sometimes I don't. I was just driving down a highway when I get to a red light and this kid comes screaming into the intersection beating on cars, jumping around and running into cross traffic. I hit the siren and the kid dead stops, looks at my car and starts T-2000 running towards me. He gets like 10 feet from me and then just lays down on the ground. I utter a confused what the fuck and get out. I ask him what his issue is and start approaching slowly. Once I get close to him and he isn't responding to me at all, I see a small puff of cotton on his jacket and I think, is he shot? What the fuck? So I unzip his coat and he is soaked in blood. 2 in the chest and 1 in the arm. I tell dispatch what's going on and even her acknowledging me was in a what the fuck did you get into now tone. So I start cutting the kid's clothes off and get a few chest seals on him and a tourniquet on the arm. He starts to go under on me, so I start CPR. No leaks, just hypovolemic shock. You guessed it. I drove into a shooting, but being by myself, I could only call out the other guys running away. This again is happening in the middle of a highway and now traffic is starting to blast past me, so I have to carry him off the road so we don't die. Somehow the kid lived. Oddly enough, this exact scenario happened to me 2 more times. I'm what you would call a sheet magnet. Last one, but trust me, I could do this for hours. We get a call for a completely naked woman in some guy's yard. We start thinking that it's a possible rap, so we are making a game plan accordingly. Once we show up, we see how badly she is beaten. She is able to mutter an address and he's going to kill the kids. OMFG. So we run. We run to the house, and I slam through the door. The pose is playing dead on the bed, so we quickly get him hooked, and find the room is filled with loaded guns. .45, Benelli, hunting rifles. Loaded. All of them within arm's reach. We find the kids. They are shaken up but not because of the brutal assault, but because the cops show up. Apparently this was a regular thing at the house. Screw it. Bonus episode. We get this call for a lady trying to kill herself. No reason to really believe it, but someone called, so we gotta go. We get to the house and it all looks pretty quiet. Then we look through the windows and see all the blood. Blood everywhere. So we start talking about what we are going to do when all of a sudden, the curtains fly open and this lady is standing there screaming, "It's time to die," while flipping us off and still bleeding. Heavily. Oh shit. So I grab the old key to the city and smash the door in. She tries to struggle with me, but I don't see a knife and I have easily 70 pounds on her and know what I'm doing. This issue became her struggle started to rip her wounds open, which is obviously counterproductive to me trying to get her to not die. I had to give her a shove and quickly discharged a taser into her, which worked miraculously. You would be amazed at how often it fails. We get her to an ambulance and she screamed the entire way there. Was conducting a search warrant in a luxury condo complex where a well-known street gang had set up their identity theft operation. During our SWAT briefing, the detectives informed us that one of the gang members had a violent history and is known to carry a firearm, hence the need for SWAT for an identity theft search warrant. We breach the door, make our way through the first 2 floors of the 3-story condo, and do not encounter anyone. We are now making our way to the small 3rd floor landing that opens up to 2 bedrooms, left and right. I'm number 7 in the stack, 7 operators back from the front. As the one-man, point man, steps onto the landing, the left bedroom door flies opens, and the team encounters 3 suspects. The first 5 operators make contact with the 3 suspects, take them down, and enter the room to the left. As the first 5 are dealing with the 3 suspects in the room to the left, the 6th operator in the stack and I are trying to get up the stairs as fast as possible to take care of the room to the right. As we are reaching the landing, the right bedroom door swings open and the suspect with a history of violence is standing in the doorway with a female. Both immediately turn away from us and proceed to go back into the bedroom. The 6th operator goes after the female and I go after the suspect with the violent history. The suspect is now running towards his bed, and I'm doing the same. When he reaches the corner of his bed, he Superman jumps onto it. I followed suit and Superman jumped onto the suspect's back. As I'm on his back, he is reaching his hands out in front of him towards the pillows. After a brief struggle, I gained control of him and placed him in cuffs. Once the scene and suspects were secured, I lifted up the pillow he was reaching for, and I find a loaded handgun underneath it. In the moment I didn't think oh shit, but on the ride back to headquarters, when I had time to process what had just happened, I was like oh shit, I could have been shot tonight. I would love to hear from the SWAT team that dragged me off my lawn in the mid-90s. It was a legit call, from the perspective of our neighbors and other concerned folks. In reality it was a misunderstanding, and was treated as such once everyone was on the same page. Not gonna lie though, being hauled off my property by people that seemed to come out of the trees was pretty disturbing. I was like 13, upset that my dad kicked my friends out of the house, stepped outside to breathe, got jumped by an entire team of grown-ass men in masks that dragged me off the property. I thought they were kidnapping me, and I thought they were going to kill me. Imagine my surprise when one offered me a smoke and a ride to a friend's house to wait for social services. I never went to my friends and I never spoke to social services. Didn't need to. My dad went out and got drunk. No one blamed him because his wife, my mother, had just died. When he came home he was just super drunk and thought my friends were boys. He was not okay with boys being in the house past a certain hour. As a result he tried to scare said boys. There were no boys, just my friends from school, but my dad could not tell the difference. He was too drunk. So he got his guns. Just to make sure the boys knew who they were dealing with. My friends, the boys that were actually girls, left and found the nearest phone booth and dialed 911. The rest is history. When handling unruly humans I imagine every day is an oh shit day. I have nothing but respect for our emergency responders. I'm not a cop, but this was definitely a oh shit moment for my family and pretty much for the whole department. My dad was a narcotics agent in Puerto Rico. Anyone that knows PR knows there's a massive drug issue, especially back in 2012. He was absolutely devoted to his job, and I mean, that man would pick up as many volunteering hours as he could once he hit overtime. There had been some prior drug cases that escalated very quickly because my dad would refuse to be a corrupt cop. This caused for him to be sent on time off for a bit while the situation simmered down. I particularly remember the one time he got sent to Dominican Republic by the force for 2 weeks to keep him in the down low. During one of these holiday times, 26th of June, 2012 to be exact, he was doing his usual, which was spending the day with my little sister, my grandmother, aunt and her son. I remember we were talking over Facebook Messenger. I was telling him about how I just gotten a promotion at my new job and how my now eldest daughter was doing. He later ended the conversation with, "Okay honey, I'm going to drop off your sister at her mom's house now. I'll call you as soon as I get home and you can tell me all about this new promotion. I love you nerd." Fast forward to about an hour and a half later, around 10 PM or so, our house phone rang, which was very unusual, but I paid no attention to as I knew my mom would be answering the phone. After about a minute or so, all I hear is a very quick scream followed by the sound of my mom literally choking, which at that point I just ran to her to see what I needed to do. She suffers from anxiety, so the choking sound was normal to me. I come to find her on the floor with phone by her ear, crying her eyes out while she's covering her mouth. I'll cut down to the chase here. I literally had to slap her across the face to tell me what was going on, as she was refusing to speak and this wasn't an anxiety attack. Next thing I hear is, "Your father's just been murdered. I'm so sorry baby," and the rest from there is complete blackout. I've been told that as soon as I blacked out, I ran out the front door to the parking lot and I started screaming and punching the pavement. I don't remember it, but I did wake up the next morning with bloody knuckles. It turns out my dad did a bust the previous week or so on one of his days off. He walked into a robbery at his mate's pub with what was unregistered guns. He arrested the man and called on duty officers to pick him up. This guy apparently told him, "I don't know your name, but when I get out I will find you and I will kill you." The guy made bail, and on that date I stated above him and two of his other gang members followed my dad from my grandmother's house to drop off my little sister, who was turning 10 years old in 2 weeks, and then followed him to what was nearly less than a mile from his house, ambushed him and shot him far too many times. He was severely injured, but managed to ring emergency services and get picked up via ambulance. He had enough strength to give description of the car, number plate, and say, "My daughter, my granddaughter, my daughters, my granddaughter," right before taking his final breath. My dad was 37 years old when he died. He would have survived the whole thing if it wasn't for the one bullet that ruptured his left lung, and the heat of the bullet didn't reach his heart. He had a heart murmur. TLDR, my dad devoted 15 years of his life to the police force in Puerto Rico, and his refusal to be a corrupt cop and strong will to be there for his community took his life by a pose that is currently getting 5-star hotel treatment and maximum security to this day. We all knew the risks of the job, but we never thought we'd be one of those families that'd have a fallen officer. It was a bittersweet moment for my family, but also the police department that loved him so much and everyone that had ever met him. My sister missed out on her father-daughter dance for her quinces. I wasn't walked down the aisle by my father, nor did I ever get the opportunity to ever share a father-daughter dance with him. My eldest daughter will barely remember him, and my youngest daughter will never get to meet him except through photographs. Police officers of Reddit, no matter what part of the world you are, then thank you for putting your lives at risk every single day to protect the lives of us civilians. I know there's more good than bad cops, and I love you guys. And if any of you know which officer I'm on about, and you were part of the massive national and international condolences letter senders, my sister and I have them all. We read them every year on his anniversary. Sorry for being late to the party. This is my dad's oh shit moment, but unfortunately it involved me. I personally only remember a few details of what happened. The rest of it is what was told to me. My dad's a cop and was working New Year's Eve 2015. I was at party that night, but left the party early. My mom and brother were at their own party, so I texted her and let her know I was on my way home. I didn't bother texting my dad since I didn't want to bother him. I was about 10 minutes from home, and I was making a turn and I see this car speed through a red light and slam into me. That's the last thing I remember. My Jeep was wrapped around a tree, and I was in the side that was smashed into the tree. According to the other officers, my dad was the first one to show up to the accident. They also said they've never seen my dad go ballistic. They said he tried to manually pull my Jeep away from the tree while screaming for me, asking if I was okay and whatnot. They had to wait until Jaws of Life could arrive and pry the Jeep and tree apart. Here's the kicker. I was dead by the time they got me out. But I was only dead for a few minutes at that point. Luckily the paramedics were able to bring me back. I had several broken ribs, a punctured lung, a bad head injury, and something else had burst inside me which made me bleed out, which led to my temporary demise. All the while everyone was trying to calm my dad down, who kept saying he was going to kill the sob who almost killed my daughter. Fast forward to the hospital, I finally wake up, and I've never seen my dad cry so hard. He was literally sobbing. He told me whoever hit me was going over 90 miles per hour when he made impact with me, cause the tree I hit was over 60 plus ft from where we made contact. He hit me so hard that my Jeep flipped several times before wrapping around the tree point. Unfortunately they never caught whoever hit me. I know it still haunts him to this day. He wouldn't let me drive for almost a year after the accident because he was so paranoid, and I was too, to be honest. It's a scary thing. Thanks for listening y'all. If you've got a family member that's in law enforcement, give them a hug and tell them you love them. You never know what could happen in a matter of minutes. I was lucky enough to make it through, but some others aren't. Don't take them for granted. My father-in-law was a police officer in a smallish town in NZ. One Christmas Eve he's on duty, and I was at home with my new wife and Mill. He's supposed to be home at about 11, but getting on 1 AM he's still not home. Knowing he sometimes enjoyed a beer or two after duty, I offered to drive down to the local to see if he was there. Anyway, I get dressed, go outside, and I'm just about to get in the car when I see him staggering up the drive. I walk down to meet him, and from about 5 meters I can smell sheet. Not normal sheet, but something deeper, stronger. Turns out he is covered head to toe in liquid cow sheet, soaked to the skin, dripping. So the story went, he was on duty and got called to the local mall where the Santa had been accused of shoplifting. Sure enough, they got there and Santa had bags of lollies and drinks down his pants. So they handcuff him and take him away in front of all the kids. They gave him a warning at the station and sent him on his way. Not long after there was a call to a serious car accident. Him and his partner are first on the scene. A young woman who was very pregnant had died on impact. He ends his shift and is riding home on his motorbike and starts thinking about having to arrest Santa on Christmas Eve and gets to laughing, which get to him not concentrating on riding, and he misses a corner and goes through a fence into a paddock. Bike is a write-off, but he is okay, and so is the bottle of brandy he was bringing home for Christmas Day. It was only a few kms from home, so he thinks, fuck it, I'll walk. After walking for a bit, he gets to thinking about the young woman. He gets thirsty, so off comes the top of the brandy bottle. He drinks the whole bottle as he's walking home, and as he gets to the top of a small rise, he realizes that he needs to piss. So he steps off the road, walks up to the edge of a small bluff, whips it out, and pisses into the void. As he's putting it away, he stumbles forward, trips, and falls over the bluff. Luckily an effluent pond broke his fall. For those who don't ever think of first responders as 911 call takers / dispatchers, former dispatcher here. I'll never forget the day I had a 999 officer down call, or the events leading up to it. It was about a 3-day ordeal. I actually was the original call taker. A family concerned for their son's well-being. He was off his meds and suicidal to the point of suicide by cop. Also threatening his family. He was gone on arrival for the units first responding to the scene. At the time, I also volunteered as a handicap citation writer. I finished my dispatch shift, changed uniforms, and checked out a patrol car to go issue citations. My biggest pet peeve at the time. I ended up helping out with traffic controllers units search the woods. No luck. He was in the wind. Next day, no luck in finding him. Third day. It's now Monday. Local schools are on alert. We get a sighting. Schools are now on lockdown. SWAT is deployed. We find him in the woods. One officer, attempting to do the right thing, gets close enough to use his taser. Problem is, only one prong sticks. That doesn't do a damn thing. He turns around and starts to pop off rounds. One of them striking the guy that tried to end it peacefully. The entire SWAT team unloads on him. I hear simultaneous 998, 999, which means officer involved shooting and officer down, respectively. Bad guy dies. Good guy gets shot. I coordinate a helicopter to land to assist my officer. As soon as I know he's on his way to the hospital, I throw my headset down and yell for someone to take over my channel. Go downstairs, put a dip in, as well as light a smoke. I'm freaking out. My friend has just been shot by this guy. 20 minutes or so later, someone comes downstairs and tells me that he's fine. It was a flesh wound. Suddenly, I'm perfectly fine. I go back up and take my channel back. Not too long after that, I chose a different profession. Like most cops, I have several, but the one that sticks out most is this. It's about midnight, and I get sent to a burglary in progress call. It's more of a trespass. The initial call details were that the caller had stated that a naked male had just entered his house and had not yet excited. When I got there, I first spoke with the caller, who was outside waiting in his car. He explained to me that he has just bought this house and was in the process of moving things in. He said he was in the garage unloading his truck when a completely naked male walked in and stared at him for a few seconds. The caller, obviously completely dumbfounded by this, just awkwardly waves at him. The naked man doesn't acknowledge it and walks into his house. This is when he sits in his car parked on the street in front of the house and calls police. He said he never saw the naked man leave his house. So I got on my radio and relayed this information. Now, like most first responders, my first thought with these details is excited delirium. If you're not familiar with that, think of a bad PCP trip video that I know we've all seen somewhere on the internet. They get overheated and get naked. They develop super strength, no joke, and do not feel pain. So, after putting this over the radio, several more officers show up as they were all thinking the same thing, and with excited delirium you can expect a hard and violent fight. A K9 officer shows up and brings his dog to the door and makes several announcements. Insert city here, police with the K9. Make yourself known or you will get bit. After several callouts, he doesn't make any noise to let us know he's in there, nor does he come to the door, so the dog is released to clear the home. We then shortly after hear the dog, and it sounds like he's found him. We go running in, and sure enough the naked man is just laying in the bed, with the dog latched to his arm. He's not screaming, yelling, hell he isn't even wincing. He's just punching the dog with his one free hand. The K9 handler gets his dog off, and I threw the suspect off the bed onto his stomach on the floor. Other officers are here trying to assist me at getting his hands behind his back. With no success, the suspect then begins to fight with us. Several officers then begin to utilize physical force, knee strikes and such, which he does not react to. One officer gave what's called a drive stun with a taser. What that is when you put the taser up against someone and make contact with them and push the arc button, as opposed to pulling the trigger and shooting the prongs. The suspect yelled as if it hurt, but did not react physically like it hurt. He was still resisting and trying to hit and kick officers. While in the middle of this struggle, I make eye contact with him. He's foaming at the mouth, and he says to me, "I'm just trying to save Jerusalem." These were the only words he said throughout the entire fight. The reload sheet moment was his eyes. It was like he was looking through me and not at me. It was like there was nothing behind them. It was creepy. To put into perspective how strong this guy was, he had something in his hand, which was formed into a fist, and we couldn't tell what it was. I took the tip of my baton and placed it on the side of his hand in the gap between his finger and thumb. I don't know how else to explain it. Make a fist real quick, and you'll see what I mean. I then hit the other end of my baton with my knee, eventually making enough force to open his hand. What was in his hand? A befolded leather wallet. Well, what used to be. The wallet was like little pieces of paper after the paper gets wet. He was so strong and sweaty that his leather wallet practically turned into pieces of wet paper. We were eventually able to get him into custody and safely transported to the hospital, where he was treated for the drug use and dog bite. I work in a very busy and very violent city. To put it into perspective, 2 months on the job I responded to a homicide. Male shot 11 times. The next month, a 14-year-old shot in the face and killed. I've been a cop for almost 3 years and have been on countless shootings and stabbings and have been in far more violent and dangerous encounters than this, but the look he gave me while foaming at the mouth will always be one of the creepiest and biggest oh shit moments. created an account just I could tell this story. I work for a federal law enforcement agency and work with computers. I was asked to help with a child pornography search warrant, helping seize and collect digital evidence. The search warrant was in an apartment complex and the subject was not supposed to be there. He was a large man, over 6'4", and over 350 pounds. Supposedly, he was out of town traveling. We had contacted the apartment management to get a key, so we wouldn't need to break down the door down. Everything was pretty low key, yet we still had bulletproof vests on and such. The apartment manager said it was odd that the subject had told her that he would be out of town, but requested that no one go in his apartment. Weird. The mood was very casual, and when we got to the apartment, I stood next to my coworker as she knocked. There was no answer. We knocked again, just to make sure. My coworker inserted the key and opened the door, which stopped due to the chain. This was my first oh shit moment. He wasn't supposed to be home. The subject's name was Mr. Anderson and I immediately stuck my hand in the door trying to undo the chain. "Mr. Anderson," I shouted. "This is the police. We have a search warrant." I couldn't the chain off, but I kept calling out to him. "Mr. Anderson, open the door. This is the police." Shit, I thought. I'm Agent Smith from the Matrix. The team was obviously uncomfortable just standing around. We hadn't heard anything, and too much time was passing. I said something like "fuck this," stepped back, and kicked the door. It flew open, and we all rushed in, guns raised. The one-bedroom apartment was a hoarder's fantasy. There were towers of clothes and boxes everywhere. Furniture was on its side for whatever reason. It was as if the subject had turned the small one-bedroom apartment into a maze. I felt like I was entering Hannibal Lecter's SP summer apartment. The smell of unwashed 6 feet 4 inches 350 lbs plus man was heavy in the air, and then it was over. He wasn't there after all. I guess he must have put on the chain on the door as an attempt to keep management out. The team was shouting clear and I took what seemed like my first breath. I was standing in his bedroom, next to his empty bed, when I looked down and noticed the loaded gun. The pistol was huge, a beautiful thing, and then I had my second oh shit moment. Was that there in case the POPO dropped by. Next to this huge handgun was a rifle. And then another as I walked back through the apartment and the maze. I found more and more rifles and guns. These were choke points. Positions of cover he could retreat back to, I suppose, while firing on whoever was coming into his apartment. When I got back to the door, I had my third oh shit moment. It was a corridor leading to the door. Inside the apartment, behind the turned over desk, there were rifles and ammunition. As I stepped into this homemade bunker, I could see the broken door that we had been knocking on just minutes earlier. In my mind, I could see the door partially closed and my hand fumbling for the chain. The rifle's rounds wouldn't have been slowed down by the door. They would have cut me and my team down. Our body armor wouldn't have saved us, but he wasn't home. It somehow got worse. We found Polaroids of kids. Terrible stuff. But it turned out that he was taking pictures from his computers, trying to make it more real. There were printouts from his work, customers who he found attractive, and taken their personal information home. Why? For what? No idea. And that was my oh shit moment. TLDR. Executed a search warrant in an apartment that was set up for a trapped man to make a last stand in. But luckily, he wasn't home when we came by. I was leaving the airport one morning, and I saw one of the airport cops get hit by a car going highway speeds. He flew off the air about 20 yards or so, and would have bounced off the front bumper of my car if I wouldn't have slammed on the brakes. I was the first one to reach him, and he was in real bad shape. He had blood coming out of his nose, and mouth and fluid coming out of his ears, but was still breathing. His partner that was not struck by the vehicle arrived shortly after having to run the distance from the initial point of impact. He saw me helping his partner and started changing course to help the motorist that had struck his partner and crashed. So I yelled over to him to come over and be with his partner, and I would check on the driver. I really didn't think that he was going to survive, and I wanted to make sure that he was at least with his partner if he didn't make it. The driver of the car was conscious but unresponsive with superficial injuries. We later found out that she had a seizure and had the gas pedal all the way to the floor, and that was why she hit him with so much force. Hearing an officer down call on the radio is really bad under normal circumstances, but being on scene when it happens is haunting. Just as a clarification, I work as a Leo at our airport, but not with the airport police. So I knew these guys from seeing them around while at work, but never worked with them full time. I'm an explorer, and about a month ago I was riding out with one of the officers I always go out with, and we were driving down a main street when I see a guy standing in a bus stop holding a hatchet. So I tell my officer and we flip around. Our beat partner also flips around. When we go to make a stop on the guy, he starts running from us, so our beat partner cuts him off with his car and both officers get out to chase him on foot. The guy tripped on a driveway and dropped the hatchet. When he goes to get back up, our partner goes to shove him back down and starts to grapple with him. At that moment my officer and I realize the suspect pulled a pocket knife out and was about to stab our partner. My officer quickly kneed the guy's arm with the knife down and pulls his gun out at the guy. I was expecting to see a guy get shot point blank that night, but luckily after a few seconds he let go of the knife and we were able to get him in cuffs. Here is the oh shit moment. Sometime during the fight the guy sheets his pants. Could have been while getting elbow blows, or when he realized he had a Glock 21 in his face. Jesus, it smelled so bad. Funny part was, while at the hospital getting cleared, since we had a use of force, my officer was interviewing the suspect, and he said he was getting chased by two guys who looked just like my officer and our partner. Until the police showed up and saved him. Guy was obviously crazy and didn't remember much. My buddy who I was riding out with said that was the second closed he had been in his 5 years onto shooting someone. Glad things didn't go that way. TLDR, guy runs from us, tries to stab an officer, gets a gun in his face, gives up, shoots himself, says he was getting chased, and police helped him. A couple stories from a family friend, but not me. Guy used to be a Navy SEAL. Super hardcore, super big, ridiculously strong. He always wore clothes big enough so you couldn't tell how big he was, but he was big. He went from being a SEAL to a cop. One day they were doing self-defense training for being an officer. The training officer had a thing for picking the biggest guy in the room and taking them down. He didn't realize this guy was a SEAL. He brought him to the mat and the instructor told him that he's going to come at him and do whatever he can to stop him. The ex-SEAL agrees and kinda just stands there. He says begin, and the training officer charges him. As the officer reaches him, he brings his arm back and throws a punch, knocking out the officer and breaking his nose. Guy ended up being okay after a while, but didn't mess with Mr. SEAL. Another story, he was doing a normal patrol and noticed a guy swerving back and forth around 3 in the afternoon. He pulled him over and the guy got out of his car and started getting aggressive. He supposedly smelled of alcohol. He goes over and tries to talk to the guy, but the guy still had his door open. Guy somehow gets him near the open car door and slams the door on his leg. Ended up breaking the SEAL's leg and got him real angry. As he falls to the ground, the drunk guy gets on top of him and starts throwing punches. He kind of gets his arm back and throws an angry adrenaline-filled punch, reels back and hits the guy in the face. Almost broke everything bone in this guy's face. Nose, cheeks, 2 teeth and the bones around his eyebrows. Super hardcore. Over the summer I was working my beat when a barlow came out about a dispute in progress between a man and his family. The mother called 911 and told dispatch that he had assaulted her and his grandmother. She told dispatch he had a knife and was trying to assault them. My sergeant cleared unit's lights and siren to get there, and I was only a few minutes away. One of my partners beat me there first by a minute or two. Dispatch checked on him and he advised he was good, so when I finally arrived I was under the assumption he had things under control. I exited my car, turned my camera on, and started walking up to the house. When I entered inside through the garage, the mom and grandmother immediately swarmed me, yelling and crying, saying, "Please don't shoot him." It was at this moment that I looked over in the kitchen and saw my partner, gun drawn and pointed at someone down the hallway out of view. I literally pushed through and away towards my partner, drawing my weapon and asking him what he needed. He told me to switch over to less lethal, so I refasted and drew my taser. At this time I made it over to him and finally saw the sun standing about 15 to 20 feet away from us down the hallway. He was pacing and screaming, but at this point auditory exclusion had already set in a bit, so I have no idea what he was saying. I asked my partner what he had in his hand, and he told me it was a box cutter. Meanwhile mom and grandma are still screaming behind us, please don't shoot him. Tase him but don't shoot him. So my partner continues to talk to the guy, asking him to drop the knife, telling him we just want to talk and help him. He's not doing so. I hear a few other units call out on scene on the radio, and one of them is a K9 unit, so I pipe up and ask him to grab his dog, tell him our guy has a knife and we currently have him at taser and gunpoint. Well, the subject hears me say this, and it seems to set him off even more, so he starts yelling and moving towards us. Well within the 23-yard rule. So once he is about to hit the threshold of the kitchen doorway I light him up. He stiffens and I see the knife drop from his hand as he falls hard and backwards. He goes through the first cycle and then I see him start to move and try to get up again, so I light him up again. We move in and get him cuffed. He had cut out a chunk of meat from his chest and was saying he just wanted to die. Turns out he was also high on meth and probably some other stuff. It was a textbook scenario and thank God my taser worked. Because of it hadn't we would have had to shoot him. American officer here, Midwest. I was backing up another officer on his traffic stop. It was about 1 AM. Driver was very intoxicated. Other subjects were in the vehicle. Each person in the vehicle is well known to us for gun violence and drug trafficking. After securing the driver for his violations, we determined contraband was in the vehicle from driver admission, observing and open bottle of alcohol, and smell of burnt cannabis. It's illegal in my state to possess cannabis at this time. We ask the two to exit the vehicle for a search. As they begin to exit they jump out and knock an officer down, hurting his elbow and knee. They then take off running in separate directions. 3 officers take off after one. Catch him. He was tased due to resistance and possessing a stolen firearm. For note, he is a convicted felon. I took off after the other subject by myself without realizing it. I chase him on foot for about a block. I'm about 10 feet from him, not gaining or losing ground but keeping pace. I see him reach into his back waistband and produce a handgun. Out of reaction I start to unholster my firearm. Before I even draw down on him, he begins to turn towards me. For some reason, whether by accident or intentionally I really don't know, he dropped the gun. We paused and just looked at each other for probably a whole second. He began running again, and I reholstered and continued running after him. This epic hard-thumping chase ended with him tripping over a gutter and my catching him with no actual force being used. Also, my catch was a convicted felon and the firearm was stolen. P.S. I typed from mobile, so please excuse typos. 2 weeks out of the academy I got guard duty over a double homicide in the middle of a sidewalk. A month later, chased a guy through the projects after he bailed from a moving car which went up a hill in neutral, then rolled back and hit my patrol car as I was getting out to chase. Got lumped up before running him down and getting surrounded by his neighborhood backup. Very sketchy. Got into a shootout. Guy died. Not getting into that. He committed a murder and it was a suicide by cop thing. That's all I'll say about that. Wrestled a man with his mind blown on PCP, calling himself Starchild. I can't express how hard it is to win a fight with a guy on PCP. He smelled terribly, so I rolled the back window down a crack and he barked out the window for the entire ride to the lockup. Had a similar fight with a Native American who decided he could cure his diabetes with a combination of peyote and garlic eaten over 3 days. So gross and violent, I'll spare you that one. After becoming a detective I have to go to autopsies. 6-month-old child, 11-year-old girl, several adults, but one stuck with me. Female killed by Mera Salvatrucha. She was strangled and had a plastic bag tied over her head, the kind with the smiley face and "Have a nice day" written on it, the type from Chinese takeout stores. She had been stuffed under bed and was found 3 weeks later in mid-July with no air conditioning. Gonna spare you that one too. Like the old Shutton lady who went down for 2 weeks and the flies took over her body into her home. That was rough. Then the hooker beaten and robbed. The Boy Scout leader child molester. It's not just a stereotype. The guy who tortured his wife by placing her hands on a hot electric stove. And the father who murdered his daughter because she grew old enough to tell others what he'd been doing to her. I'm not a cop, but was a paramedic for just shy of 10 years. One night shift around 4 AM we were parked in the ambulance bay at downtown hospital. After transporting a patient to emerg, my partner and I were sitting in the front of the ambulance while I was finishing up my paperwork. Important to note that we are issued ballistic vests, but it wasn't mandatory to wear them. Lots of medics don't where I worked, and I had stopped wearing them a couple years earlier as they are super uncomfortable. And I don't have kids or a wife, so I thought fuck it. Comfort over getting shot lol. It's that point in the night shift where you are in a partial daze and just trying to get through to the finish line. All of a sudden we hear screeching tires behind us, and a few moments later someone is screaming, and I hear they just shot him in the faking head. Point context and hindsight are everything in this story. I literally had no idea what was happening. All I knew was 1 gun. 2 someone has just been shot. 3 I have no idea where the shooter is. The first thing that jumped to my mind was an active shooter going nuts in the hospital. The second thought that jumped to my mind is fuck me. I wish I was wearing my vest. My partner and I give each other a look and we hop out to go check it out. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in retrospect it was probably the bravest thing I've ever done in my life. In my head there was possibly an active shooter. Gunplay had definitely occurred, and instead of piecing the fuck out my partner and I decided to go towards the commotion so that we could help in whatever way we could. I didn't see it like that at the time. It just felt like our job, and it wasn't even really a decision. But fuck me, younger me had some brass balls, even if he didn't think so at the time lol. I'm older now, and if I were ever in a situation like that now, if I chose to approach, it would be way more cautiously than just blindly heading towards the unknown. Thankfully there was no active shooter in the ambulance bay outside the emerg that we could tell of, but someone had been shot in the head. Their friends had driven them to the emerg in the back middle seat of and SUV. There was probably 5 people there. It was super sketchy because you don't know who shot who. If there is going to be more violence, you don't know who is a good guy or bad guy, and there were no police nearby or anyone that could secure the scene. About 10 minutes later, when the police did show up, it was the SWAT guys and they were very heavily armed and everywhere lol. We took a cursory glance inside the SUV, and my partner went to get a stretcher and tell the nurses there was a critical patient just outside. Inside the poorly lit SUV there was a 30-ish-year-old male sitting in the middle of the SUV, and under his right eye there was a dime-sized gunshot wound. The textbook extrication of a patient with a traumatic central nervous system injury is to maintain C-spine and place them on a spine board while keeping the neck neutral. The way I extricated him was a little bit different. His face was pale blue, and he was having agonal respirations, a reflex when you are in the last moments of dying. My friend showed up with the stretcher, and realizing that this guy was most likely in cardiac arrest I thought fuck it and climbed in, bear hugged the guy from behind, and pulled him out of the SUV, and fell backwards onto the stretcher with him on top of me. I squirmed out from under him. Nurses were there at this point. They start doing CPR, and I push the stretcher, while we head in towards the trauma room. My adrenaline was pumping high. I was wide awake now. I watch as the team starts doing their thing, and when they log roll him, that's when I see it. That dime-size entry wound became a grapefruit-sized exit wound on the back of his head. Oh shit. And then I look down, and I'm absolutely covered in blood. I live downtown not too far off, and I called my supervisor and told him I wanted to go home and have a shower and change, and he gave me shit for not having an extra uniform at our station, about the same distance from the to my apartment. Lol. In my head I was like fuck this place. Kind of long story. I've seen some shit in M's, but that was probably the most oh shit moment I can remember. Late to the party, and I'm a firefighter not a cop, but we were called to a suicidal man and arrived maybe 1 minute after we heard the cops go on scene over the radio. We pull up, and there's 2 cops standing there with a guy laying on the sidewalk in a very unnatural position. I'm thinking he killed himself, but both cops look spooked without a doubt. We walk up with our medical bags and the guy sits up, which was the first sheet for me. First cop pulls me aside, I'm the medic on our shift, and tells my captain and I that you tried to commit suicide by cop. It's a real thing. Apparently they rolled up and both stepped out of their cars and he immediately charged at them with hands behind his back. Several orders to stop and show his hands followed, and then he whipped his hand up from behind his back and was holding what appeared to be a handgun. Here's where the ultimate kudos to these and all other cops comes in. They both reacted in a fraction of a second and both tased him. They both tased him without any communication between the two of them on a split-second decision. Any cop on earth would have the right to shoot this guy. I couldn't believe what he was telling us. Most cops I've seen carry their taser on their non-dominant side of their belt, so to make that decision that fast is impressive as hell to me. Turns out the guy, kid really 21 years old, had a 6 inches black pipe. At 2 AM it would have looked enough like a gun to me. Point to all Leos. Thank you. The crap you deal with will never be known or understood by the average citizen, but you guys are badass. Stay safe. Not a police officer, but I plan on becoming one. Read a story about someone, and it gave me flashbacks to something I had to deal with at work. Point, it was a normal day, kinda slow. I had worked in the food industry. My driver shows up to work in a bad mood, which isn't anything out of the ordinary. He starts taking his deliveries. As I'm running the store, 9 PM comes by, and he comes in and is freaking out. I start talking to him because he was super stressed. I tell him he has to calm down. There's only an hour rush before we close. He goes out on a delivery and comes back and starts crying. I ask him what's wrong, and he says I'm not happy anymore. Is it wrong to not be happy? I just want to be happy. I don't want to be here anymore. Is it wrong to be unhappy? I'm trying to reassure him that everything is okay. At that moment, he didn't want to be alive anymore, and he kept telling us this. I sent my insider home early because if anything happened, I didn't want him to be there for it. He was only 16. I'm texting my employer to contact his family, friends, anyone who cares about him. The driver was doing dishes whilst having this mental breakdown, and all I could think of was, he's gonna snap and try to do something to himself for me. I'm just sat there, trying to talk to him and calm him down. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where he was mentally. I was worried that if I made any visible attempts to call EMS or the police, he would try something. If I sent him home early so nothing happened in the store, he might do something when he leaves, leaving me feel guilty for not helping. I end up closing the store when it's time, and we just talk about things. While I was talking to him, I was actively getting a hold, or having someone get a hold of his family and friend, telling them what was going on. He left and I went home. The next day I find out that he hadn't been taking his medication and was having a mental breakdown from his schizophrenia. For the last hour of work I thought I was going to have to fight for either his life or mine, running through the scenarios of how this is gonna happen and what I'm going to do to not only be prepare myself, but how I'm going to help him if he does anything to himself. I was not prepared for that night. A friend of mine who is a police officer would like me to share. Got a call for a domestic. Domestics are dangerous because you never know what exactly you are walking into. Gets to the address, all the lights are off, no signs of life. Asks dispatch for a repeat on when the call came in. Gets told that there have been no calls from the address. All calls have been from a third party, the alleged victim's mother. This was the 4th call in 5 hours. The other 4 came in before he came on shift and hadn't been cleared yet. So, he walks up and knocks, no answer, but there's a dog inside going nuts. Under the sound of the dog barking, he thinks he can hear a cry for help, but he can't determine if it really is a person or not. He tries for another minute or so, still can't tell. So he goes back to his car, radios for a backup unit, and asks if the original caller can be contacted, and if they are a key holder, so they can open the door lawfully. Key holder is less than 5 minutes away. Key holder, mother of one of the parties, shows up and they unlock the door. Mother takes the dog and police enter. 3 officers at this point. Turns out the power has been disconnected, so in addition to the oddness of the scene, they are viewing it by flashlight. There's blood on the walls, the ceiling, bloody streaks on the walls. It's not going to end well. First human they come across is a woman in a corner, curled up, face badly beaten, sobbing. She points towards another room and says, "He's in there." So, one officer stays with her, calming her down, assuring her that she is safe, so on. The other two, my friend included, enter the living room. This guy's under the cushions on the couch, beaten to sheet, as in, 4 days later in the hospital, he finally could open his eyes and speak well enough to give a verbal statement. He's missing a couple of fingertips, part of an ear, he's covered in bite marks, and he's got a pretty gnarly stab wound in his shoulder that is bleeding like a son of a beach. He's shirtless and covered in scars all over. Various stages of healing, so someone has been beating up on him for a while. Dude can't really talk, so he points at his cell phone on a table nearby. He then shows them a video of the woman hitting herself and screaming at him. The oh shit moment is realizing that there are 2 cops with the victim and 1 cop with the aggressor, who clearly can do some damage even to a large man, completely off guard and unaware that the person he is sitting with is actually a damn psycho. They got her cuffed and out of the house with little incident, short some threats and screaming, had them both checked by EMS. He went to the hospital, she went to the hospital, and then to jail. He said it was a good reminder that no matter what a situation looks like on the surface, you never ever let your guard down until you are sure you have the whole story of all the players involved. Since then, they clear residents of a home out of the home as they find them, and he is aware that just because someone looks like a victim at first glance, or that conventional wisdom dictates MAL equals AGGRESSOR, that's not always the case. I used to be a beat cop a long time ago, and I'd get called out on domestic disputes all the time, hundreds probably over the years. But there was this one guy, this one piece of shit, that I will never forget. Anyway, big boy 270, 280. But his wife, whatever she was, this lady, was real small. Like a bird. Wrists like little branches. Anyway, my partner and I got called out there every weekend, and one of us would pull her aside and say, "Come on, tonight's the night we press charges." And this wasn't one of those deep down he loves me setups. We get a lot of those, but not this. This girl was scared. She wasn't going to cross him. No way, no how. Nothing we could do but pass her off to the EMTs, put him in a car and drive him downtown, throw him in the drunk tank. He sleeps it off. Next morning out he goes. Back home. But one night, my partner's out sick, and it's just me. And the call comes in, and it's the usual crap. Broke her nose in the shower kind of thing. So I cuff him, put him in the car and away we go. Only that night, we are driving into town, and this sideways asshole is in my backseat humming Danny Boy, and it just rubbed me wrong. So instead of left, I go right, out into nowhere, and I kneel him down, and I put my revolver in his mouth, and I told him, "This is it. This is how it ends." And he's crying, going to the bathroom all over himself, swearing to God he's going to leave her alone, screaming as much as you can with a gun in your mouth. And I told him to be quiet, cause I needed to think about what I was going to do here. And of course he got quiet, goes still, and real quiet, like a dog waiting for dinner scraps. And we just stood there for a while, me acting like I'm thinking things over, and Prince Charming kneeling in the dirt with sheet in his pants. And after a few minutes I took the gun out of his mouth, and I say, "So help me, if you touch her again I will such and such and such and such and blah 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 blah." Just trying to do the right thing. But 2 weeks later he killed her, of course. Caved her head in with the base of a wearing blender. We got there was so much blood you could taste the metal. The moral of the story is, I chose a half measure when I should have gone all the way. I'll never make that mistake again. No more half measures. Nowhere near as exiting as other people's, but I only have about 18 months experience. My biggest oh shit moment was when I was off duty going to a local ship with my dad. When about to enter the shop a young girl ran out carrying a shopping basket which she had filled with expensive steaks and ice cream. I chased after her to a dark alleyway around the back of shops, where she got onto a bike and started to cycle away, but thankfully I managed to catch her before she got going and pushed her off her bicycle. As she fell off, a man appeared out of the alleyway who she was obviously associated with, who was extremely pissed that I had tackled her off a bike. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a blade and started threatening us with it. It was at this point when I reached for my pepper spray and baton that I had my biggest oh shit moment. You get so used to having tools with you like a taser slash stab vest slash pepper spray etc. It suddenly hit me how dangerous this was without any of my personal protective equipment. Thankfully myself and my dad managed to deal with him and no one was hurt. There is very little that good, clear and assertive communication skills can't achieve. We even retrieved the shopping 2 point. If you're not a police officer then don't be a hero. It's not worth being stabbed over a basket of food. Why? I've had a few, but this is the first one to come to mind. We had just started our day, so we were standing in front of the station house bullshitting while loading up the cars and whatnot. I'm enjoying my post-roll call cigarette when I hear one of the new jacks come over the air. Shots fired 167 and third. She stated, calmly. So calm we all took a moment. Maybe she'd heard fireworks or shots in the distance and being new put it over right away before investigating. 167 and third 167 and third. Shots fired. She comes over again. This time you can tell she's moving. You know it's legit. We dive into our cars and peel out. I see an unmarked car pull over on 167 and pick up the female officer who was putting it over. They start going eastbound. I follow a few lengths behind them since they know who we are looking for. Crime sergeant. I've got the post who put it over. We're looking for an older male, black, bald head, black hoodie. Fled east on 167. No sooner did the words leave his lips than I look over to my right and see a guy fitting the description to a T. The unmarked sees him too and pulls over fast. The guys jump out of the car in front of me and race towards him. The male sees them coming and jets out into the street. I'm a little further back, so I gun it to try and cut the guy off with my car without running him or the other cops over. As I'm getting closer, he grabs at his waistband in a frenzy. Just as he's pulling his gun, my front tire hits a sewer grate on the curb and blows. Pop. It sounds like a gunshot. The guy gets spooked and tosses the gun in the air. He pauses to try and catch the gun. The man's juggling a .357 in the middle of the street. It's faking huge. A Rick Grimes sized faking hand cannon. Butterfingers misses the catch. Clank clank clank. It bounces on the ground. For a split second, he thinks about going for it, but glances over his shoulder at the rather large officer about to tackle him, and decides against it. My partner and I jump out of our car. I recover the mini howitzer he dropped. My partner and two of the cops from the unmarked tackle Butterfingers about half a block down from where he tried to pull it on us. The rookie got a medal for it, which was nice for her. My partner and I got a thanks boys and had to change the tire we popped. Still, made for a good time. I hope this counts, but when I used to work at a popular bookstore, there's one story that we had to call police on that I think I'll remember for a long time, and I would think those officers will. 2.1 evening. Everything seemed normal and fine. It was really slow back in the music department where I worked, which was kinda secluded from everything else. I was basically just twiddling my thumbs at that point. All of a sudden I hear a lot of customer commotion. At the same time a coworker comes back into my area looking like she saw a ghost. I ask what's going on, and she says a guy is walking around bleeding everywhere with a slit neck. At first I don't think it's gonna be too bad, just cause that particular coworker can be known to stretch the truth a bit. I was curious, so I told that coworker to stay in the department, and I was gonna go check it out. I step out and go up towards the front, and I see my manager talking to a tall guy in a black jacket and black jeans, and yep, he'd slit his neck with a razor blade he'd brought in, and was just standing there, zoned out, no talking or emotion in his face or anything. Blood was dripping down his chest area as well as onto the floor / around the store, wherever he was walking. He was either mentally not okay, or was heavily on drugs, or both. The part where the cops / M's get involved, and the part one thing I'll remember for a long time, is this. My manager had the guy positioned close to the front of the store, so that when cops arrived they wouldn't have to walk him through the store. As soon as cops / M's arrives, and this guy sees them, He pulls out another blade. Manager somehow managed to get him to drop the first blade and starts quickly slicing at his neck even more. I'd say upwards of about 25 to 30 cuts when the cops showed up. Not sure how many total. He cut real deep and there was a lot of blood, but he didn't cut deep enough to kill himself. I'm not sure if that was his end goal, but that's something I'll remember for a long time. They sent most employees and customers home for the night. Last thing about the situation I remember is him being taken on a stretcher with a bandaged neck, still with the 1,000-mile stare and no emotions whatsoever. I'm a police officer in Texas. Back in 2017, when Harvey hit the Gulf, myself and about 100 others from my department volunteered to go down to Houston. We went to help HPD due to them being overwhelmed. When we got there the power was still out in most of the city. We were working 12-hour shifts for 12 days. It was crazy. All the looting, robberies, thefts and domestics seemed to be never ending. On multiple nights we had officers calling shots fired on the radio due to people shooting at them from the darkness while they were driving down the street. One day, a call came out that someone had been robbed and that the suspect had taken their car and fled the scene. We were close by and headed that way when we heard another officer calling out that he was behind the vehicle. We tried to get to him as soon as possible, but when the suspect realized the police car behind him, he hit the gas and fled down the highway. We went up and down the feeder road several times while chasing the suspect before he finally went into a residential area. Sure enough, as we are behind him, we see him reaching around the car and he started throwing drugs and stolen property out of the windows. Due to him not paying attention to the road, he T-boned some poor innocent lady at the intersection. We were the second unit, so when the accident happened the first unit jumped out to apprehend the suspect. As we were getting out, the suspect jumped out the passenger window and ran towards the gas station on the corner. At that point other units were arriving, so we jumped back into the car and hauled ass towards the gas station. We pulled to the west side and another officer pulled to the east. The suspect was stuck between a brick building, a 10-foot fence and 2 police cars. We got out of the car and began yelling at him to get on the ground. The suspect ran towards the fence. We chased him and maybe made it about 10 feet. My oh shit moment was when he turned around with his hand in his waistband and I saw the handle of a handgun. We yelled drop it as we were drawing our weapons. The suspect pulled the gun out and threw it straight up into the air and over the fence. We then got him on the ground and cuffed him. As we put the first cuff in him, another yelled at him, "What were you thinking? We almost shot you." The suspect didn't seem to care and proceeded to curse at us and tell us that he was gonna get us fired for police brutality, even though we never used any force other than putting his arms behind his back and getting him in handcuffs. We told him we all had body cameras and it was recorded, so he was free to report our brutality and that he was lucky he didn't get shot. His response was "fuck you" as we put him in the back of the car while we waited for the ambulance to come check on him. No sympathy for the person he just T-boned or for the person who he robbed. Also, I work for a large department in the top 15 biggest cities by population in the country. I've seen tons of stuff and have been in lots of bad situations. I've been shot at, swung on and called everything for a human. But this guy took the cake for now. 2 months on the job, still in my field training stage, where I'm riding with an experienced officer basically on the job learning and evaluation. 6 AM driving in my personal car to the station to get picked up for day work. Half awake singing along to some Linkin Park on the radio, looking forward to my morning monster after my training officer picks me up. It's still dark out. First thing I notice is a car in the middle of the road, lights out on the opposite side of a major roadway in my sector. I think great, some drunk left his car in the middle of the road. Then I see someone on my side of the road crouched in the roadway waving at my oncoming truck. Third thing I see is a figure laying face down in the pavement by him. I put my headlights on them, hop out. Guy is in absolute hysterics. I see the person on the ground is a young female in what one would call going out clothes. She's face down in a large pool of blood spreading under her head. I call it in as an off-duty unit and check for vitals. Can't turn her for CPR as I realized she's been hit by this guy's car. As I'm checking her for breathing and pulse, she lets out a twitch, a faint squeak from her voice, and a long fading breath. This 18-year-old girl just took her last breath essentially in my arms, and that was it. She was gone. She had run out in front of his car in the dark, intoxicated, not paying attention. You don't forget the first time you watch someone die violently, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Cried on my way home from that shift. Not me, but a teacher of mine who was formerly a cop. I'll say it in his words cause that's how I remember it. I pulled over a driver on the freeway because he was showing signs of impaired driving. The car pulls over and I start to my thing, checking plates etc. And immediately he gets out of his car too. Now right away this makes me nervous. When you get pulled over by a cop you stay in the car unless instructed to. OC-1. I tell him to get back in the car and he is getting upset and is clearly intoxicated. And he's big. He's 6 feet, 250 pounds easy. Now he starts walking to me. I reach for my gun, then switch to my pepper spray. I've only got one thing I can do with my gun and I don't want to do that. All of a sudden he charges me. I get a shot of pepper spray on him, but he tackles me into the ditch. This is a big guy, but he's intoxicated, and I'm trained, so I manage to start getting the upper hand. As I'm gaining control, I see from the corner of my eye 2 more people coming around the corner of the vehicle, OC-2. I didn't have time to notice if there was anybody else in the vehicle. Now I'm in trouble. It's the absolute most I can do to keep this guy subdued. I cannot take on 2 more guys and I didn't have time to call any backup. Fortunately for me, these 2 guys were actually driving by on the freeway, saw me get tackled, and came to help. Thank God moment. I arrested the guy and made it out that night with a few bruises and scratches. He actually stayed in contact with the attacker a little bit through his career. Saw him at a few other calls, domestic disturbances etc., and the guy treated the cop with a reasonable amount of respect. The guy died a few years later in a gang shooting. Cop had kept his obituary. Clearly made a lasting impact on him. Welfare check on a suicidal party which an ex-boyfriend called in and said his ex was thinking of killing himself. Pretty standard until dispatch airs that the suicidal party had transferred all his money to his ex's bank account. Okay, so he's probably pretty serious. What dispatch failed to relay to me was that this suicidal person was being investigated by another agency for child pornography and possible sexual assault on a child. So I show up with a partner and we knock on the door. No answer. It's dark inside and the shades are drawn, so we think okay, maybe he's out. Knock a couple more times. Announce police department. Nothing. So we ask hotel management if they want to check the room, since we don't have any exigency to go in. Suicide isn't a crime where I'm at after all, so we don't even have reasonable suspicion to suspect a crime is taking place. Management says yes, they want to check the room. Management comes over, they puts the key in the door, and before they turns the handle says I'm kinda scared, and my partner says, don't worry, we'll keep you sub. Dude was sitting in a recliner right inside the door and shot himself in the head right as we were opening it. The bullet went through his head and bounced off the window. My partner was outside of point, mixed emotions, because that was my first TB as well as my first shots fired. On the one hand I don't feel too bad, because he was an asshole who victimized children, but on the other hand I wish I knew all the details, so when I was knocking on the door I could have made it more clear that it was a welfare check and that he wasn't in trouble. Also, I would have realized he was on his last leg, so to speak, since he was being investigated for child porn. Also, I don't feel too bad, because I don't think, even if I knew all that, I could have prevented it. He had all his notes laid out, the gun he had bought earlier that day, with the receipt and ammo right next to it. So it's pretty clear he had it planned out and was going to go through with it. I had a family member that is a retired state trooper. At his retirement party, one of the other troopers told a story illustrating how my family member always kept a cool head in bad situations and remained professional, which helped keep victims and his own men calm as well. Apparently, my family member was best friends with a guy named Buddy. They were considered a funny pair because in the deep south, Buddy was as redneck as you could get, while my family member was a pure-blooded Yankee. They went to academy together, worked in the same department together. My father even hosted Buddy's wedding reception. One day, a local sheriff's department requested assistance with a divorce gone wrong. A guy was holding his soon-to-be ex-wife hostage in their house. Children were involved. Guy was an ex-veteran, etc. Buddy was the closest responder, and as a veteran himself, thought he could relate to the man and calm him down. Negotiations didn't work. Buddy got shot in the head through the door. The trooper called my family member up, as he was the superior officer at the time, to tell him what happened and to be careful when he got there. After being told that his best friend had been shot in the head and killed, my family member was silent for about 10 seconds and responded with a simple 10-4. My family member showed up. They ended up having to shoot the instigator, but were able to rescue the injured wife and children. Troopers don't usually have as much issues with casualties as police officers do. Their biggest risk is stopping someone who would rather shoot than get caught with drugs in their car/warrant on them. My family member said it made him think long and hard on his career because Buddy had 2 children that grew up without their dad. I'm no police officer, but with my ex. We were in bed around 1 AM. Heard screaming from street. I go down to see what's what. I see blood over this girl's face. I walk up to see if I can help. Turns out she has a deep laceration on her eyebrow. I banged the door she was next to while I held her eyebrow up and above her eye. The woman answered the door. I shouted her for a bone dry clean tea towel. She gets it to me. I wrap that on her head. Start to clean up the wound. And while I do so, I try to calm her down, asking what happened. Turns out, she had a glass ashtray thrown at her, and it shattered on impact. When paramedics arrived, I quickly said I'm ex-military with war service including medic expertise, so I give them a full rundown on the situation. As she binged in the ambulance, thought nothing of it. About 3 or 4 months later, the woman whose eyebrow I saved, I think I saved lol. Medics probably sewed it back up, but still. Anyway, I saw her in a supermarket near my home, and she thanked me and asked if there was anything she could do to repay me. I said no. I'm just glad I was awake to help. She was too. She said she had been walking aimlessly for what seemed about 30 minutes or so at the time. She said people saw her, but didn't know what to do and avoided her. I said well, I've seen a lot worse, so it wasn't a problem for me to help. I'm just glad she was okay. And luckily no glass shards were left in her eyebrow. A few years ago I got dispatched to a house for a check on the welfare/possible domestic. I get to the house in the middle of nowhere and see a solitary male in the house. He sees me and runs upstairs. The doors are locked. His relative arrives and she lets me in the house. I'm still alone at this point. Backup is on the way from a good distance out. I enter the house and hear this guy shuffling around upstairs. I walk to the landing and peer down the hallway. He pops his head out from his room and is rambling nonsense. I draw my weapon and hold the corner waiting for backup. Backup gets there and we advance down the hallway towards his guy, who is now in the doorway with his hands out front of him. I go to handcuff this guy and he resists. He has superhuman strength from the PCP he was on. I pull him arms down and my head tilts down. I then see a loaded gun he was standing on. It's game time now. We wrestle over the gun, and I was able to pull him away from it. He thrashes out of my grasp and launches down the stairs. Hits me in the face in the process, chipping my tooth. On the ensuing foot chase he gets tased by multiple cartridges and later pepper sprayed. He shrugs it all off until we get him on the ground and he finally calms down. I'm not sure when he dropped the gun or how close I was to being in a shootout, but I hugged my wife extra tight when I got home. Not a cop, but was a security supervisor. 4 years. Made a random sight check of a standing guard at a midtown grocery store. We were standing 5 feet from the door discussing how uneventful his night had been, while 2 people seemed to be chatting just inside the doors. All of a sudden, one of the people chatting decides, why, we never found out, to stab the other repeatedly and run out the door. The employees locked down the store while I called the police. While I was on the phone with dispatch, the stabber decided to come back and start banging on the now locked doors trying to get back in. While I was still standing outside the same doors, dude again left, but this time I followed about 29 feet behind him to let the dispatch know where he was going. He turned 2 dark corners in rapid succession, so as I post sight of him I stopped following. I then saw my guard across the street, about to turn a blind corner in the direction the stab happy man with a knife, covered in someone else's possibly diseased blood. I literally had to yell at my guard to keep him from going into what could have been a very bad situation. As the cops eventually found the guy hiding in a dark corner that block point, it really didn't hit me exactly what had all gone down until I was writing my report, which I knew would be entered into evidence for an attempted murder / aggravated assault trial. Where to begin? I recall doing a job in 2017. I was working a 10 p to 6 am night shift in an area in Brisbane, Australia known for high amounts of domestic violence. At about 1:30 that morning, my partner and I were sent code 2, lights and sirens, to a DV incident point. Shortly after arriving, my partner and I walked up to the address we were sent to and found a male and female with another female. The other female was quite distressed. She claimed she had been bit over the head with a guitar, bleeding a little and extremely emotional. She immediately told us how her boyfriend in the house next door was going to kill himself because they were breaking up and that we had to get over there right now. She wasn't in a too bad way, so figured we would just make sure everything was alright next door. My partner and I went to the front door of the neighboring house and immediately through the flash screen saw pools of blood. Calling it a bloodbath was an accurate description. That's when I went, fuck, the flash screen was locked and an expensive type, not easily ripped off its hinges like others. I've gone to a nearby window, withdrew my baton and smashed a window in. I've climbed through the window and, knowing I'm going into a DV incident and blood has already been spilled, drawn my gun and commenced clearance of rooms. My partner, who wasn't quite as abled as I, couldn't climb through the broken window, so I've gone to the front door to let him in. Sadly it was key locked and couldn't just be simply unlatched and opened, so I did what I had to, kick it in. After 3 attempts, struggling to keep my balance after slipping on pools of blood, the screen door flies across the front yard and my partner is able to get in. Shortly into this, I found a man, face down in his own blood, and I mean dark, congealed blood in the kitchen, thick and dark. He had a fork in his hand, pieces of glass from where the oven had been smashed, and just a feast for the senses. No house lighting on, so working in torch lighting, blood everywhere, the smell of liquor and sweat and blood. I can still put myself there. Nearly 18 months on point. We couldn't get the fork out of his hand initially, so we threw some handcuffs on to maintain some control. I can still remember reaching down, grabbing his wrist, and feeling my hands going into his arms, and feeling bone and tendons. A DV investigation has now launched into saving this guy's life. We had only recently received training in the management of trauma wounds, and knew I had a compression kit in the car. I've called urgent on the radio, a phrase that gets everyone's attention, and requested another car and a sheet load of ambulances. I've run out of the scene, still slipping on the floors covered in blood, grabbed the trauma kit for the car, and ran back in. As soon as I was out, I'm back in, ripping into the trauma kit, and applying a tourniquet to the guy's arm, packing his wounds with gauze, and keeping pressure on to keep the bleeding under control. It could have been as short as 2 minutes, but felt like an eternity for the ambulance to arrive. The sirens could be heard in the background, but only gradually got louder and louder when the ambos turned up. It's their show now. We help out by clearing space and holding bags of saline while they assess. Unbeknownst to us, he had a stab wound to his chest and the sac around his heart was punctured and filling with blood, slowly stopping his heart from pumping. The advanced care paramedic looked back at us and asked to put this tourniquet on. I replied and was immediately told that I just saved this man's life. He was not in a good way, but was already of the cusp of death. Ambus got him out of the scene and it all goes from crazy and manic to routine. My supervisor told me to post a notice of damage for the broken window and door and straight back to the station to do the paperwork. DV to a cop is always a job you just hate going to. Not for the fact it happened, but often talking to people older than you on how to be in a relationship with each other. And knowing that you'll most likely be there next week dealing with the same thing. This went from my partner and I winging about that, to breaking into a house, fearing we would have to deal with an armed male, to getting covered in blood, saving a life. I'm proud of what I did, and sadly this is just one story in a cast of others I could say I've gone OFAC. My mom's last boyfriend was a cop and loved to tell us the most gruesome things he witnessed. I couldn't make this shit up. Even if I tried. They were chasing some criminals in a car. They hit a pole at full speed. Perp 1, the driver, didn't have a seatbelt on and was flunked through the windshield on the hood, face hanging down, dead on impact. Perp 2 exited the car and started running. While some other cops were chasing and arresting Perp 2, the firefighters arrived to clean up the dead body and wreckage. Right when a firefighter got out, Perp 1, hanging dead upside down on the hood, vomited out all of his organs. He explained to me why. It was something with muscles relaxing when dead, but I'm not sure at all. The firefighter looked behind him while climbing down from the big fire truck, saw the guy vomiting out his organs and faints. Firefighter to the hospital for breaking his arm while falling, leaving his colleagues to clean up a dead guy who just vomited out his organs. He responded to a domestic violence call. The guy opened the door and stood right in the door opening with a gun aimed at my mom's boyfriend's forehead, shouting at him to leave. That was a pretty oh shit moment for him. He talked to the guy, explaining that he was just there to hear what was going on and that a gun isn't necessary and would only cause trouble. Then he said he was going to put his hand on the gun to push it down so he could not accidentally hurt anybody. He did put his hand on the gun, but from the moment it was pointed away from him and he had a grip on it, he swinged his arm back and knocked the guy straight out with a punch to the nose. Last one, but I really don't know a lot about this. He was once in a shootout with the Sekakis, a quite famous crime family here in Belgium at the time. Not a cop, but my stepdad used to be back in the 80s, and he's told me a couple of stories. Responded to a call that a woman hadn't been seen for a week or so, turned up to the house and saw the windows were all blacked out. It was the height of summer, broke down the door and literally thousands of blue bottles flew out the house. Another call where the woman in question was found unresponsive but, insofar as he could tell, not quite dead. Immediately started CPR, big breath to the mouth ready for chest compressions. Just at that point he realized she was in fact dead as she released all the gas caught up inside her and essentially burped straight back in his mouth. Another where one of his colleagues climbed in through a high up bathroom window to look for a guy and put his foot through the guy who had died on the toilet just underneath said window. One last one. Responded to reports of an armed robbery at a bookmaker's, ran to the door, and just as he got there the door flew open and the guy fired off a sawn-off at pretty close range into his chest. Now I'm guessing the gun only had rock salt or some such as ammo as he got knocked off his feet, and it shredded the stab vest he had on, but he was okay. The stab vest, and I mean stab vest, was the only one in his division. Early 80s, not much in the way of body armor for cops back then, and he got disciplined for wearing it. My cousin was a cop for less than a year. His oh shit moment happened when he was on patrol with a partner and they nabbed a lady for drunk driving. They arrest her and are processing her. She's combative and screaming, cast all of the officers. From what he says, she was no real threat because she was in handcuffs and she was tiny and also in the holding cell. Cops are getting pissed because she won't shut up. So 4 of them go in there to intimidate her. After that didn't work, one of the officers picked her up by the neck, still in handcuffs at this point, and slammed her down face first onto the concrete bench inside the cell. Evidently knocked a bunch of teeth out and broke her nose and bones in her face. All 4 cops leave her in a pool of blood, laughing and patting each other on the back, while this lady is bleeding to death with a potentially fatal injury to her face. One cop was picking up teeth off the floor, while another cop was simultaneously telling the lady to stop faking it. They reluctantly called the paramedics and the official story was she tripped while in the cell and sustained her injuries by herself. He said there was not a single redeeming cop in the department. Every single one had major flaws. He couldn't handle how the cops treated people, even innocent citizens, so he left after less than a year and moved out of the state. He has tons of stories, but this was his oh shit moment when he realized cops can get away with literally anything under certain circumstances. Scared the shit out of him. not a cop, and likely to get lost in all of these comments, but I'm posting his oh shit moment because I was never able to find out who he was to thank him for saving my life. Point was living in Long Beach, California at the time. Friend asked me to pick up her cousin from school. Not having a car, she loaned me hers, as long as I would drop her off and pick her up from work. It came time for me to pick up her cousin, and I blew through a red light because I was running late. Got pulled over. Got asked for license and registration. License was easy. Registration? Must be in the glove box, right? Out fell a chrome polished toy Colt 45. Before I could say fuck, and in less than a heartbeat, I heard his gun in holster, cork, and was placed to my head. Don't move. It was a blur after that. But watching that toy gun fall out of the glove box was so numbing and surreal that I can't even explain it to this day. I don't remember how I got to the curb, the cuffs, anything more than a blur. Yes, I still got the ticket, but it was for speeding and not running the light. Honestly, it could have been for anything at that point, and I would have been okay with whatever ticket I got. I was beyond joyous to have lived through that event. I even blocked it out of my mind for some 20 years. When it came back to my head, I even tried to contact the police department to find out if they had any record of the event, and so that I could tell him thank you for not pulling the trigger that day. The amount of work to track him down would have been monumental, because those records were archived, and I'm 2,000 miles away. I've had officers pull me over many times, guns drawn, but that one time is the one that holds me in check to this day. I work security for events sometimes, so not police, obviously. Got a report of a guy passed out in the bathroom, so I and my medic head to check it out. Figure, man, dude's drunk. Well, put him to bed, right? No fact, no. Dude's like a 2 on the Glasgow coma scale. He's on the verge of aspirating his vomit, which, by the way, is faking everywhere, while his pants are down, as he had apparently been taking a sheet. Everything is just faking everywhere and it's awful. We start digging through his wallet for identification and insurance, cause this guy's definitely going for a ride, and find out he's diabetic. EMTs show up and start putting him back together and getting him on the stretcher, and find out his blood sugar is insanely low and he was blowing crazy high. Either was enough to knock out a horse. Together this guy was in danger of dying. I was happy once the ambulance's doors closed. Finally, a quick one from my father, officer for 35 years, and his favorite story to tell was when he got called out to a suicide call. He gets there, and the guy tried to cut his own throat with a machete, but didn't quite finish it, and was well enough to talk, so the skin of his throat would vibrate while he was taking, since he had gone at it with his machete in a sawing motion. He said it was almost impossible to keep a straight face with that sight. Not me, but my dad was in a plainclothes robbery squad in the UK, so they didn't have guns. His sergeant lived nearby, so he'd drive their unmarked minivan home and drop the sergeant off on his way. One night, about 2 AM, they went off duty, and as they were on their way home, they saw a big group kicking something on the ground. My dad called it in on the radio in their car. He was older than his sergeant, been in the police longer, and spent his whole life from 8 years old on in that city. He said, whatever you do, don't tell them we're police. So they got out, ran over as the crowd seemed to disperse, and saw what they were kicking, a man that was beaten, and as they got closer, saw from the blood he'd been stabbed. My dad got to him first, and was trying to stop the bleeding as the crowd, which turned out to have some gang members they recognized, looked at them. His sergeant, who was a Marine in the First Gulf War, pulls out his baton and shouts out, police. Get back. The crowd doesn't, of course. He looks over at my dad, covered in blood and unable to do anything else, and they share their oh shit moment. Then he starts yelling. 30 seconds later, they hear sirens, a few cars and an ambulance arrive, and they end up all okay. Neither of them could say why they didn't end up in hospital that night. Not the cop. My ex was. They got a call about a break-in at a pharmacy shortly before Christmas. Caught the guy red-handed, but he was armed, so they were trying to be cautious about the apprehension. They talked him out of the building and onto the side steps when my ex recognized the guy. He had been arrested a couple of years before for B and had had the worst possible experience in prison. The guy had just gotten out about a month before and said he was trying to get money for Christmas presents for his kids. So they are talking to the guy, trying to get him to set the gun down, and the guy just keeps pleading with them not to send him back, and of course they can't make this kind of promise. My ex said he knew it was over when the guy started emptying his pockets onto the sidewalk and crying. Wallet with $3 in it, no ID, about 40 cents in change, a lighter, and a pack of cigarettes, sobbing the whole time. He laid it all out neatly beside him, put the gun under his chin, and pulled the trigger at it. Another incident that was a different kind of oh shit point: got a call about a Vietnam veteran who was lost in his flashbacks. The guy had broken all the lights in his apartment and was crouching around trying to hide from the Charlie in his mind. He was also armed to the teeth and his wife was inside. They went up to the door to try to talk to him and he opened fire on them. They hauled us out of there and called the hostage negotiator. I was a rookie, I think 3 weeks off field training, and just started driving on my own. My sergeant was unreliable and made poor tactical decisions, so my confidence in backup was minimal. I responded to a armed burglary/robbery. A handgun was used to rob my dad's neighbor. I found the guy. We will call him BB. Had been walking down the road about a mile away from the scene and my backup was 3 minutes away. I drove past him about 50 feet while I radioed my location and asked for the channel and turned my Charger around. As I drove past I didn't notice he turned around too and was walking at me as it was pitch black in a rural area. My headlights found him 20 feet away staring at me. Fiat clenched. I turned my lights on. B speed walked at me closing the gap. I have small hands for a male and a Glock 22 is a large handgun plus leather glove. I tried to exit my car and he lifted his shirt and grabbed something large and silver in his waistline. My seatbelt caught on my radio antenna as I exited and slowed me. I thought oh shit, oh fuck, has going for his gun. I drew my pistol and reached for the trigger yelling show me your faking hands B. I tried to pull the trigger but missed the center part which is a safety. My gun didn't go off and he put his hands up. He was grabbing a belt buckle and had ditched the gun up the road. I would have been justified if I shot, but thank God I didn't. That was the most terrifying moment of my career because I thought I was possibly going to die and I almost shot an unarmed guy. Had nightmares for a few nights after that point. B is a pretty bad dude. The week before he broke into a house naked and assaulted the people, including a mentally challenged man, with a belt and knife. He also stopped a puppy in front of children and the disabled owner. Thankfully he is locked up for a few years now. Security officer, here. Do I count? Started off a night shift at the factory with a mouthy lady partner who tells me all about that one guy who is a janitor for the same factory that has relationship problems. Now there's her, an older woman agent, and myself at the guard's house when another janitor arrives and warns us that there are people shouting in front of the main building. Later questioning by myself reveals they were afraid it would get out of control and that there was a car with suspicious people waiting not too far of the conflict, but I did not know that at the time. We'll call my partner Nancy for this. Catch. She storms off at the news to go see what's going on. The older agent tells her to wait and to let me deal with it cause I'm a man. Nancy doesn't wait. I stop at the door to wait for instructions and help convince Nancy, but when she hears it's that janitor with the relationship issue she leaves by saying something along the lines of, I'm in the best position to deal with this. I'm French, Oklahoma. I can't translate word for word. Sorry about that. I follow her after a moment's hesitation. I was supposed to go anyway, according to instructions, and I can't just let Nancy get hurt. So the guy's about 18 years old or so, and his girlfriend of 16 years old are indeed standing outside of the main building, but the girl is shouting and hysteric while the guy just seems depressed or down. Nancy starts taking side immediately, which I just disapprove of but keep silent for now, and behind her, the little girl starts immediately shouting that he pushed her and kicked her and that the two guys in the car are his drug dealer. I take this opportunity to speak and tell her that we cannot do anything about this, that she needs to call the cops if there was violence. After a moment I finally get to speak to the guy. While Nancy talks to the girl, I tell him to go inside and avoid the confrontation and to stay until his shift is over. To call a lift if he needs one. The oh shit moment comes right as he is about to enter the building as the girl tries to walk past us or around us to reach the guy. She had been yelling the whole time and now she seemed intent on not letting the guy go. So she jumps the fence and runs up to him. Oh shit. The worst of what she could have done at that moment, like shiv the guy, was in my mind the whole time of those few seconds. Fortunately it was just a big ol' hug. Manipulative creature. I wouldn't be hugging someone who allegedly pushed me in the dirt. But hey, whatever, I didn't touch the girl, so I didn't get in trouble, since she is underage and the guy was not harmed. I just wish him the best in getting rid of this kind of influence in his life. Poor guy. So, not a cop, just a rent-a-cop, but my oh shit moment happened on my first day as supervisor, training a new hire for the facility, a 5-story public library, going over what she should expect that day, closing procedures, etc. When one of my other charges comes up to me and says someone in the 3rd floor passed him a note I needed to read. This floor is a very busy floor, since that's where all of the internet access computers are. The note read that someone in one, if the other computers had a gun under his jacket, and that he had seen it. We alerted staff, who tried as best they could to get people off the floor. The reason we had security in the first place was due to a shooting involving staff, so they didn't take the threat lightly, and the police came very quickly. They came in and swooped him up and patted him down. No gun. Checked his bag. No gun. Then I heard our note passer taking to the police. Apparently, he had seen the gun in a dream. Then there was another oh shit moment. A homeless woman was flipping off kids through the window. Cop was passing by, so I asked if there was anything he could do to help. He seemed genuinely sorry that there wasn't anything at all he could do. I couldn't even bar her entrance, since it had been done on the sidewalk, not inside the library. The very next day, the woman walks up the stairs to the 2nd floor restroom, and while still over the carpet, did her pants and sheets right in front of the door to the restroom, in such a way that the door smeared it into a beautiful brown rainbow. Then there was the time where someone left about a gram of crystal meth inside a pill bottle with the original prescription sticker still on it. I reported it to my supervisor, who then calls to our supervisor informing him we are bringing it down. My supervisor and I have a pretty easygoing way about us, so we figure, why not see if anyone's looking for it, we'll sniff him out, shouldn't take long. We hit the elevator, and as it's about to close, someone puts their hand in to stop the doors from closing. The man gets on, clearly panicked, and started nervously taking about his medication that he left near the printer, where we'd found the meth. My supervisor and I look at each other and just about died laughing, because the next thing I knew, he asked us if we'd found it. We said no, but we'd help him look. Had him running seeing the library fire about 2 hours looking for his medication. Don't do meth, kids, because it's awesome and you won't want to ever stop. Not a cop, but was a prison officer at a work release center in Illinois. It was mostly low-level offenders who had non-violent crimes and didn't get any writ oops while in the state pen. Now, this story requires some background. The building was an old YMCA, so it was rooms with bunk beds and a door, and the person/persons occupying the room had a key. The rules were mostly the same as jail, not allowed items like weapons and phones, lights out after a certain time, and people who had jobs off site or who had home visits had to answer the phone when we called to make sure they were where they were supposed to be. I was pretty laid back compared to the other guards who took their job far too seriously. My tour was 11 PM to 7 AM, so when I would come in the floor, everybody had to be in their rooms for first count. After the count I would allow the residents, we had to call them that, to visit a different room, to play cards or watch the game, as long as they were back and forth in various rooms, because everything was on camera. I never wrote people up for smoking inside, just made them dump it. Write-ups can get you sent back to state prison. I would even bring McDonald's back for those who couldn't leave the facility yet and had to eat the cafeteria food. Everyone loved having me on their floor because I understood that not sweating the small stuff makes the job easier. One day this new guy comes in and I just knew it was gonna be trouble. He couldn't shake the aggressive mentality he developed. Like a week after he came, I made him dump his cigarette and sent him back to his room. He gave me a hard look and all I could think was, oh shit, this is gonna be my first fight and this guy outweighs me by like 70 pounds of pure muscle. But he left without a word, so I let it go. Later on I saw him go into the bathroom on camera. A few seconds later, like 5 other residents went in after him. About a minute later the 5 come out and go in different directions. About 5 minutes after that the guy from earlier comes limping out the bathroom and to his room. I asked around. Turns out he was overheard that he was gonna fix that MF who dissed him. Some of the other residents proceeded to jump him in the bathroom and warned him that if anything happened to me, they would send him to medical in a body cast. Apparently they liked having me on duty too much to risk anything happen to me. I spent the rest of the shift laughing at that. By the end of the next week he was out Tather back to Stadville. I loved that gig. Used to play Call of Duty between counts on the computer and I would play music over the PA system during the weekend. However, the idiots managing the place were incompetent and the turnover rate was ridiculous. I eventually quit because people from first shift kept calling off for medical reasons, making someone have to do a double. This happened almost every shift. Did 3 days in a row like that before I had enough. It would have been worth it if the pay was decent, but it was a contract job, so they got away with paying us 12.00 an hour. Yeah, that job sucked ass.